When students came back in person, at the beginning of the pandemic, students began virtual learning. I'm sure many of your kids and grandkids and so forth did as well. So our students did the same thing for a little while. When we brought them back in person, the volunteer room, because the needs were so high, had overtaken all that space. So we had to claw back classroom space for our culinary school. So now the culinary school students and the volunteers are sharing the same space. We know that this is not going to allow us to effectively serve the people in Kent and Sussex counties, and it's certainly not going to allow us to plan for the future. So our leaders recognize this in a way that it's becoming a theme. And so the president's talked about of late making sure that no person goes hungry. He said, this is happening across our country, and this cannot be who we are as a country. These are not the values of our nation. We cannot and will not let people go hungry. We cannot let people be evicted because of nothing they did themselves. They cannot watch people lose their jobs, and we have to act, and we have to act now. Our governor said it last week.
Do you want to point out, though, that when the
Go back a
president
slide,
came
Mark,
for
if you would.
Governor Minner's funeral,
Yeah.
the White House called Chad and said, are you the owner of the land?
I said yes.
And he said, and then he called me and I said, are we the owners of the land? And can we have the president land there? I mean, we have not even put a shovel to that ground yet, and absolutely we could. But it was really important to us to be able to be there when he either landed or took off and say, where your feet are right now is where the new food bank is going to be. And for us, for that awareness, for him to know what our plans are, it was impactful.
That's so true. For him to know that space was not just going to be an open field, but it was going to be a food bank.
Yep. So we told him he can land there for another few months if he needs to.
And we invited him back for when we cut the ribbon down the line. With all of you, we hope. But our governor recognizes it as well. He said in his State of the State address last week, in part about talking about using federal stimulus dollars, talking about what we were going to do as a state with those funds. And among other things, he said, we'll help nonprofits modernize their buildings so they can better serve the people of our state. So we know that this is important, and in talking about the work that his wife Tracy has done, who's been an incredible partner with us in her First Chance Delaware initiative, he talked about and praised the food bank for what has happened over the course of the last two years or so, with the incredible response that the food bank has made, along with many others, in ensuring that we can provide necessary food for people that need it. So, as Kathy said, we've purchased already 11 and a half acres in the Independence Commons Business Park in Milford. You're familiar with it. You might not know it already. It's where the Delaware Veterans Home is. There's a large 11 and a half acres right in front of that the city of Milford owned, and we were able to purchase that from them. I will say, because it was owned by the city, and they have been trying to get people to locate in that park, we did get it at a very discounted rate from what other properties of similar size were running in the area. They didn't charge us less. It's not like we got some kind of in. They charged us what they were going to charge anybody else that came forward to buy it, but it was about $500,000 less than what we could have gotten any other property for in the area of similar size. Shortly after buying the property, we've talked to the stakeholders in the area. There's the Delaware Veterans Home, obviously, the Greater Milford Boys and Girls Club, and Delaware Hospice, about how we can be good neighbors and support their efforts, how we can support the veterans that are living at the home, either through resources and supporting their family, how we can have greater partnerships with the Boys and Girls Club and supplying the food that many of those children need access to. So we want to be good neighbors in that particular park and make those connections with our neighbors in that area. So we've entered the design phase. We have plans at this point to begin construction in May of 2022, so a couple months away, with the goal of a certificate of occupancy in August of 2023. Fingers crossed that everything allows us. Yes, sir.
Just so I can get some kind of perspective of how big this place is going to be. I've been to both your facilities. How does this compare to the one in Newark?
Well, sir, you just read the next slide and didn't even have it. Mark, if we can go to the next slide, please.
Slightly smaller.
Just a little bit.
But 2 stories.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, which will be nice.
So we have a roughly 80,000 square foot facility in Newark. This facility will be about 67,000 square feet approximately. We've really done the homework to make sure that we don't have just extra space for extra space, that we've really thought through the space that we need, what our resources are, what's going to give us some space for the future, and feel like 67,000 square feet is the sweet spot.
Are you going to vacate your other property?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's up for sale.
Yep. We'll move everything. The plan would be to move everything to this new location.
And actually, it's a good point to make that we literally just signed a lease. We are out of space there, so we're going to be renting space as well for the next 1.5 to 2 years, just to be able to continue our operations.
So we have a construction manager. We've contracted Whiting Turner to be our construction manager and Becker Morgan to be our architect. And at this point, so this slide is probably a little inaccurate already. We think probably about $32 million approximately will be the cost of the facility. Important to note that when we started this project, Kathy, we were
less than 20, but that was a smaller footprint. And then as we got to where we thought we really needed to be, it was probably between like 23 and 25. And every time we meet, the supply chain has just really taken a hit. And every time and so we've been, we've looked at it. Should we scale back? Should we phase, certain aspects in over a couple of years? And the guidance that we've gotten is no. If you do that over the next couple of years, it's not going to do anything but probably get more expensive. So we're holding true to trying to do it all in one project. But yeah, 32 is probably where we're looking right now.
Yeah. And again, fingers crossed that number stays there and that we don't see other supply chain issues throughout construction that cause that number to go even higher. If y'all have a crystal ball that you'd like to let us borrow, I'd be happy to take it. I think Kathy would too. So.
And a magic 8-ball would be great too.
Order your overhead doors now.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? That's what's been happening. That's things that can be, steel. Right.
Who knew?
I'm learning a whole lot.
We're becoming construction experts.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So a little bit about our vision here. We can see this is a little bit about a little flare of what we anticipate the facility will look like. Again, trying to make sure that we've best utilized space. It is a two-story administrative area that the administrative area would be over our cafe and our healthy pantry center. We'll talk about those in just a second. And you can see on the bottom left there, the entrance corner view, just kind of looking at the facility. And then the plaza view, plaza access view sounds very schwanky. But it's actually just to the right, if you could see beyond the right side of the screen there, that's the garden. That's the space where we're growing. We're going to be growing food products there that'll go into our resources, that'll go into our workforce development programs, that'll go out to those that need it. But it's also going to be a wonderful place because the veterans home will be on the other side of that garden. It's also going to be a wonderful place for our veterans to be able to go as well. And in conversations with them, we look forward to them being able to utilize that space to maybe take a plot and grow items there if they want, to walk through that space, and to really just kind of make that space a part of their space too. And we're excited to honor those that served by putting a memorial there, recognizing those that are reside in the home and all those that have served. So we're excited about that.
Just when the second floor also gives us the opportunity, so we're going to be adding the logic part of our workforce development. So we have that in Newark, but not in Milford right now because we don't have the space. Logic is logistics, operations, and warehouse. So we actually have, the class. It's a parallel class with our culinary class in Newark. We only have the culinary class in Milford. But we'll take you on a virtual tour, which is pretty cool. But you'll see we built the classroom on the second floor overlooking the warehouse. So when the instruction is happening, the instructor can be pointing out all the different things that, typically he just needs to talk about and then go and show. So lots of thought went into the design.
Oh, for sure. And we're, as Kathy talks about that logic program, we know that warehousing and distribution are among the top targeted industries for Kent County right now. So I think Linda is here tonight somewhere.
Fine.
There she is. We had a wonderful meeting with her a few weeks back to talk about the project and kind of learned that in meeting with her. And so that's something exciting that we're excited to be able to put folks, graduate folks into that industry, into that trade, because we know that it's so needed in Kent County.
And one other parallel program we're actually working on to add is we do a pre-ETS, it's called, a pre-employment training for young adults, teenage 14 to 21 with developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities. And we hold that class in the summer. It's a shortened class, and it's all, some of the young ones are not ready to go out into the world yet, but if they're 20, 21, they are. We're actually doing a parallel program that will be for adults, because that's a huge population that needs that additional training. And we've had a couple, actually this class in particular, a couple of people that have been in the class that are diagnosed with autism. One's diagnosed with kind of multiple complex disabilities. And the teaching's just not the same. And that the opportunity for that person to learn alongside the other students, it's not fair to either one of them. They're not getting the right kind of education. So we were just awarded a grant to actually build that training so that we can have the right type of training for those folks so that they can be productive, citizens too. Everybody wants to be meaningful, have meaningful employment and be somewhere where they feel like they're trained for and they feel like they're wanted. And so we're really excited to be able to add that to our training.
So we wanted to take you just on a very brief tour. This is a conceptual design. So we want to note as you walk into this, you're going to see a lot of glass in this presentation, and glass is expensive. So while we have wonderful architects, they like to make it pretty, and pretty isn't always necessarily what is the best thing. So a lot of this is going to come out, and we're value engineering that now. This will be the cafe, where we'll be having an opportunity for our culinary students to get real world experience, serve food. This will be open to the public. Folks will be able to come in, get a sandwich, come in for lunch. Very successful and a great way for our students to get that experience. Across the lobby there, that glass area on the other side will be the Healthy Pantry Center, where folks are coming to get direct assistance. And this is just that administrative space. So we're walking down the hall now. To the left, you won't see kitchen equipment in there now, but will be our culinary kitchen. It'll be industrial, so that we can do that training there. I hope nobody has issues with quick movements, because this video moves real fast. Going down the other hallway here, this would be entering in towards the volunteer room. We'll over double the size of our volunteer room, giving an opportunity for more folks to come in and volunteer in our facility in Milford. Making a quick turn again, up the stairs, through the wall. This is like a bad video game. But up the stairs here, you'll be into the administrative space and that training area that Kathy talked about. So over here, down this hall, this will be that logic classroom overlooking the warehouse, with a quick stop by this little mock interview room here to the right. Boom. So folks will be able to do interviews in there, so we'll be able to bring in outside folks to do mock interviews with our graduates and preparing them for the workforce. Conference room here, but you're going to walk into this classroom. You can see briefly on the right the window overlooking the warehouse. So our logic students will be able to see what's going on in the warehouse. This were a video game that your kids were playing, we just died because we landed in the first floor.
Don't throw anything over there.
And this is offices. So we, as we've said, we've so utilized all the space in Milford that we need to have offices for our staff. Again, you see a lot of glass here. A lot of that is coming out. We don't need fishbowl offices, right, Kathy?
Correct.
So a lot of that glass will be coming out, and we'll be.
You have to think about active shooter, right? You don't want everything to be glass.
Yeah, we got to think safety too. And a conference room, boardroom space, so we'll be able to have meeting space for our staff, which is all gone at this point with our existing facility. You can see the garden to the right there looking out that window. And then just coming around again for just a few more offices and space. So we'll actually be able to have space for all of our staff to work This will be our food distribution team, our workforce development team, our community development folks, they're the folks that are helping with those nutrition classes and Stand By Me financial coaching. Our nutrition educators will be able to come back and have space. It's for everyone to have space will be something that we haven't had since long before the pandemic. So again, just a quick tour there. And the last room that you'll see here is a double term space for our staff for a lunch area, but also a place where we can do cooking demonstrations as well. So we can bring groups in to do a small cooking demonstration. That might be how to, again, buy food on a budget, or how to spend your food dollar more wisely, how to think through some of those things. So just a quick tour. The benefits, really, we've already told you about on our next slide here. The benefits of the new facility, they expanded cold storage and warehouse space. We definitely need it. 16,000 to 67,000 square feet speaks for itself. I think we're going to have so much more space to do so much more. A dedicated healthy pantry center space. So the folks that come to get food assistance from us at our facility are finally going to get the dignity that they deserve to be able to come into a place once we get through the pandemic and the issues that we have right now, which hopefully we're rounding the bend on. But folks will be able to come into that space, select the items that they want for themselves and their family in something that resembles a small little market. But we'll also be able to, with that.
See, though, around the side is actually, there will still be a bay there for those. I seriously think that these last couple of years have sold some people on not ever going into a store again if they don't have to, or pulling up for the curbside, delivery, and we will still be able to do that and do it in a hybrid way if somebody's not comfortable coming in.
Yep.
But sadly, we take that choice away right now.
Absolutely, yeah. We don't have an option now for folks to come in and select the items that they want, and we certainly want to get there. The expanded volunteer room space, the opportunity to bring more folks in, to let them experience what we're doing, to let them get that wonderful feeling that we have every day of being able to help their friends and neighbors by going through donations or packing meal boxes or whatever it is. Dedicated space for training programs. Our Logic program, to be able to bring that to Milford, to bring that to Kent and Sussex, to offer that program here, but also to give not only them a space, but also to give our culinary students a space, and to give them that cafe, to replicate that cafe that we have in Newark, to give them that front of the house instruction too. And to provide a place for some of you maybe to grab a sandwich when you're in the Milford area. And then that outdoor gardening space that we talked about. Growing our own food, putting our money where our mouth is, putting our crops where our mouth is, I guess, and saying that if we want to encourage folks and we want to make healthier foods available for folks, then we need to be able to show them how to do it, how to grow food in a small space, how to do those types of things. And we can't do that now. And with that, we can't do it without you. So we're here tonight to show you all of this, to tell you what our plan is, and then to say we can use your help. We need your help. And open to a conversation tonight and in the days ahead about how we can make that happen. But just knowing that we want our partners in Kent County and Sussex County to be with us in this effort, because we see this as a game changer for the people that live in our two counties. And I know that together we can make a difference for them.
So, Chad, $32 million is a pretty big bite.
It is.
How are you guys funding it now?
So we are engaged in a campaign. So we look forward to offering a campaign for folks to be able to contribute. We're looking at nonprofit dollars, foundation dollars, all of those things, and obviously making sure that we are being good stewards of the funds that are available now throughout the country through the American Rescue Plan and through CARES and other things. That if those monies are available, we are ARPA eligible. Food insecurity in response to meeting folks' food needs is ARPA eligible. So we're making sure that we have those conversations with folks. And then the people of Delaware have been so generous over the last few years in supporting our organization through the pandemic. So we're going to take those resources too and put those in to start. So we're putting our money in first to make sure that we can use those resources that folks that have been so generous to give over the last couple of years.
Yeah. But I will say that the ARPA opportunity and bond, honestly, this year is more than we've ever had the opportunity to aggressively seek. And we're doing that. And we're having great conversations with bond bill committee members, and we've had, good conversations with the state about the ARPA opportunity. And in my humble opinion, I keep using the word blessed. If we are blessed to get a good chunk of the capital covered with those opportunities, which are quite honestly, and we all know it, greater than they've ever been, right? So it would be silly of us not to kind of to go after that. Then where we would come in next is actually, we're still going to be doing a campaign because we're coming, bigger and better to the area, and it would be silly for us not to. But if we get the bricks and mortar covered, we still have programs to fund. And we don't have, the food bank does not have a single endowment of any of our programs. And so that's where we would kind of shift our focus so that we're not every year wondering, gosh, can we continue backpacks next year? Can we do this? Can we do that? That's where we would start to kind of shift our focus if we were able to cover a good chunk of the capital that way.
Are you starting from zero?
No. We're starting from, No.
So how long have you been fundraising now?
We have a committee formed, and we've done the request for ARPA. We're waiting to hear back from, like everybody else that's requested ARPA funds, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe tomorrow, or maybe keep checking our phones.
Maybe.
Someday soon, we're going to know what that is, and then the bond, obviously, you don't hear until July. Right? But we have the committee formed and ready to go. So we kind of need to know what we need, what that number is going to look like, and then start. We'll probably start actively going after. So my experience too is that naming opportunities are fantastic for people that want to be involved, and whether we name programs, and give people that recognition on the wall of a room that where the program is, we're just going to have to be a little bit flexible in how we go about it. Does that help?
Yep.
So Kathy, the ARPA funds, are you applying for direct funding from ARPA, not from any of the municipalities or state government or local governments at this point?
All.
Both.
All. Yeah,
Okay.
we've asked for it through the state, but then we have through municipalities as well.
And we are talking to our federal partners as well. I mean, there are ARPA funds that have been made available nationwide, obviously through the American Rescue Plan. How those and if those, keyword there, make their way to Delaware is, a conversation that we're having, and how they get utilized here. So we certainly are engaging our federal partners too in having that conversation about what resources they have that might bring to bear on this project too.
Commissioner Buxton.
We answered a couple of them, so good. I don't think we're in a position to articulate a number as much as it is to state clearly that I'm glad to hear that the ARPA funds at our level are included as appropriate. Mm-hmm. Because I think it would be an exceptionally wise use of funds that I would support. I just wouldn't want to go first, honestly, right? You've got big players.
Ellesmere went first.
That
Federal
helps.
government out there.
Yeah.
Let's see what they do. You
Sure.
certainly got the state government. Let's see what they do.
Exactly, and that's kind of where we are with the capital campaign, quite honestly. I want to see where we land with those, because it kind of changes our message. It doesn't change the need, and the big need and the big picture, but it changes our message.
Because I think that my thought is that it's an exceptionally important, and what a dramatic change. If we're going to have this money, and we are, it is what it is, then let's make a footprint that lasts. Let's make a footprint that pays itself forward long term.
Yep.
That clearly is one that does so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a wise use of the funds. But we have funds that we can utilize in other avenues also. If in fact the federal government, the state government go big, we can still go, but maybe change the number, not because we don't support it, but because we have a better understanding of how much you need from us.
Sure.
So I don't
Commissioner,
know
I
if
think
that's what
there's,
you're looking for, but I think it's a great chance to do some really good things. I'd love to hear what the federal and state do first, and then I think we should be next in line, us in Sussex County, no question.
Okay.
I think there's two things there to your point. I think you hit the nail on the head about making an investment that's going to last. That's what this is all about, right? Is trying to make investments that are going to pay dividends down the line. That's why you all are having discussions around this table about infrastructure and about, those types of things. Let's make the investments that are going to last a long time. This obviously is one of them. Kathy, I think, said, we want to be honest with our folks too. And so that's why we're having conversations like this one tonight and otherwise to say, again, if you all have that crystal ball, I will take it out of the chamber with me tonight if you all are willing to let me borrow it. But we don't know what those things, what those are going to look like either. And so Ellesmere was first. But while we jokingly say that, we're not looking for you to be first, but we don't want you to be last either, because we know that there's going to be a lot of other organizations and a lot of other things that come to your dais that are going to be incredibly important. And we know you want to make those investments too. So thinking about how, because of the unknowns of what some of those other things are, we wanted to make sure that you were aware of it now and can think about it from the start about saying how or if you might want to engage, because we know there's going to be lots of stuff that comes before you.
Yeah, but I think this one stays at a priority level because it's so obvious.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That means
So
a lot.
one of my favorite, I've been here since May, and one of the first graduations of the culinary class that I was able to be, in attendance, and I was, reading the graduates' names, and I read a man's name that stood up, and if you've never been, we invite you to come to our graduations. They're incredible. But they always, the graduates, if they're comfortable, will tell their story. And this one guy stood up and he said, I came to the food bank. My wife and I have 3 children. We both lost our jobs during COVID. And a friend of mine said, do you know about the food bank? Go to the food bank, they'll give you food. They were trying to figure out how to feed their kids. And he said, so I came to the food bank and I walked in the door and somebody said, can I help you? And he said, I'm caved for food. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, go around to the other side. That's where, go to the healthy pantry. You came in the front door. And he said, okay. And he looked down and he said, I looked down, I saw a flyer. And that flyer was advertising the culinary program. And here he is graduating, right? And he said, and I looked, I said, is that something I can apply for? And they said, absolutely. And he never cooked before. He never worked in a restaurant, but he wanted to do so. So he said, I took that flyer and I left. And I said, please tell me that you went around the corner and got food before you went home. And he said, no, ma'am, I didn't. And I just looked at him, I said, why? And he said, because I wanted to get home and apply, because I wanted to take care of my family. And for me, that's what we do. That's what we do for people. And I wish he had gotten food first and done both, but people are forced to make those decisions. And I love that we're there to help kind of round out their life for them in that way. And he has a full-time job at Crooked Hammock in Middletown, if you ever want to go there.
He's doing great.
Yeah,
He's doing great.
yeah.
Look, I've done most of the Kent County events at Dover Downs, and
Okay.
I went to the last one, which was just a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And I got more people thanking me for being there because they needed help than in all of the big ones that occurred back in 2020.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, back then, there were thousands and thousands of cars and families going through. There was only about 1,200 that went through a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
But the number of people who put their windows down and thanked me and cried because they were getting food to feed their family, so.
Yep.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It is.
We're seeing those numbers. So if you're saying, well, where are we right now? Those numbers are going back up again, friends. No, we're not at where we were in the early days of the pandemic. I hope we never see numbers like that in my food bank career ever again. But we're back to where we were in early spring of 2021. Those mirroring those numbers. So it's not going away anytime soon.
Commissioner Angel.
For the audience that didn't get to see, Mr. Robinson has notes here, but when he was doing the virtual go-through, that was unscripted. I was impressed with your knowledge of what was going where, how it was going, what was going to be. That was the most impressive I've ever seen as a sitting Levy Court Commissioner on something that's been presented to us. I just wanted to thank you for your knowledge and what you're bringing forth.
And can I tell you that, so Trevor Turner, our COO, and myself sit in every one of those meetings. Chad doesn't. So that's him learning what he needs to learn.
That's great. The one thing that, as you were going through there, though, the one thing that I did not notice was it's 2 stories, Is there an elevator for service or for?
Yes.
As a handicapped person, I can't look at those steps.
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
Okay,
that will never not be in my world either.
just wanted to find out.
Yep, there sure is. And what you didn't see,
Actually,
just,
two, there will be 2 elevators and access only for certain ones, so everybody can't get to the second
Gotcha.
floor if they don't need to.
Thank you.
and you also didn't see the warehouse, so I realized that some people are like, there's a warehouse there, right? Yes, that was on the other side, the other side that you didn't see.
Any other questions for Chad or Kathy?
Just an excellent presentation, and I didn't know that you did the training program, so it's new to me.
Well, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, again, I echo Kathy. We would love to have you at any time. Just give either one of us a call. Would love to host you, bring you down for a tour of the current facility, show you where we are right now. Come to one of our graduations. We would love to have any of you be present at any of those events, and many of you have in the past. So appreciate that too.
We're particularly glad that you're in Kent County.
Well,
I guess we're here, we'll say so. are we.
yes.
Business card,
Well, you will be pleased to know that we did have President Vincent at the facility a couple weeks back, and he did let me know that we weren't in Sussex County.
I bet he did.
Yeah.
He sure did. In no uncertain terms, right, Kathy?
Tell me you're
Most
close.
recent role, I had the pleasure of getting to know Tom Draper very well.
We'll be sure to rub it in his face next time.
He used to love to tell me that he could straddle the line on his property, right? Be in both counties at the same time. Well, thank you so much. We so appreciate your interest and your enthusiasm.
Presentation.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. We appreciate you all. Thank you. Good to see you all.
Good to see you too. I'm hanging in there. I'll call you.
All right, please do.
I've never been to the sites.
Levy Court gave me 50,000 back in.
Good job.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Love to host you down for a tour anytime.
Okay, thank you, great job.
Pleasure meeting you.
Nice to meet you too.
Well, but crystal water.
You really did training. What they just
You got a
gave
little
us.
Fortnite action.
Thank you so much, Wilder.
It'd be nice to see you come to fruition, for sure.
Great job. Sorry. Great job, Kathy. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Viola.
Great job, as always. Nice
Good job, good job.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have spent a lot of time over the last year handing out checks to towns and groups, and we have the benefit tonight of one of those groups coming back to show us just what they did with the funds that we granted them. The town of Viola is here with us. Mayor Ernst Arndt and Chief Cooper are going to join us at the table, but also joining us in the crowd are council people Betty Torbert, Carl Kiesling, and George Mayer. Steve. Oh, and Steve. Steve, I didn't see you. Steve Jingleman's here too. So it's good to have you guys here. We're really
Judge, how are you?
pleased to see you come back and show us just what you did with the funds. So, Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you. And
All right, thank you. I use the term mayor because it's a lot easier trying to explain. Actually, the official title is the President of the Board of Commissioners for the town of Viola. But Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, and the Honorable Commissioners, we thought it would be nice, rather than just sending in the invoices and the canceled checks, to show what we did with the grant that you gave us about a year ago for $35,000. Some of you may know, some of you may not know, but we bought the old church building in the town of Viola. Had no septic system, had no well, had no bathroom, had no plumbing. And so
That was a great
that's
buy.
I don't think it had any heat either, did it?
it had heat that worked and didn't work. Carl's been using Band-Aids to put that together.
Well, I was in there for those meetings, and I don't remember Carl saying, you don't have to take your coat off.
So, like I said, rather than just doing that, we thought it would be nice to come in and show you what we did with the funds. We have a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see. There we go. This is the proverbial hole in the ground that you're throwing money into.
Put the bodies in.
Out of the $35,000 of the grant, we spent we had estimated $20,000 for a septic system. We hit that pretty close because the final total was $20,865. Then, because of the size of the lot, and the lot is so small, we had to put in a deep well in order to put in a well because we don't have public water in the town of Viola. Again, we were pretty almost spot on with that estimate. It was $7,000 for a deep well, and we spent $7,375. Where we missed the mark is, that's more of the septic, as you can see. We had to do a mound system, of course. And one of the things we do every year is we do a Viola Street Fair, which for the town residents, it's at no charge for the town residents. But it's a little embarrassing because, again, we have a town hall, but we don't have a bathroom for anybody. We don't have running water. So with the well we put in, then we got to the bathroom, which we, again, that's more of the, there's a picture of the church that we've taken over. There's the beginnings of the bathroom. We estimated $8,000 for a bathroom, not realizing that the expense of a handicapped, accessible, ADA compliant, no plumbing, was going to be rather expensive. The first estimate we got, believe it or not, was close to the entire amount of the grant that you gave us, which threw us for a loop. So we did some shopping around, for the lack of a better term, and we've got the bathroom done for $19,000.
Wow.
With the estimate of $8,000. So, like I say, we just didn't want this, we wanted to say thank you, of course, but we didn't want to do it remotely. We didn't want to send a thank you card. You know, we wanted you to actually see what we've spent the money on. There's more pictures of the bathroom. This was the last project that was completed in just last month. And yes, we wanted to thank you for our help.
You guys have a pool.
Actually, what was funny is for the street fair, we had to ask the owner of the property where that pool is if we could use that grassy area because that belonged to him. Yeah. And years past, we had used it. The gentleman that used to live there, Ralph Gregson, passed away. And the new owners came in and were going like, we hope they let us use the grass. And fortunately, they were very understanding. They did let us use the grass yard.
That's great.
So now our next project is, we're hoping, is, you had mentioned heat. We're looking at a HVAC system. We've got an estimate, which Betty assures me is pretty accurate, of $12,000. We need new doors because, believe it or not, the doors are the original doors that are on the building. So they're not very secure. It's not in very good shape. We're going to need windows. Like others, we're looking around for funds. We have some ARPA funds. The problem we have is figuring out what you can spend those funds on. I will give credit, though, to the state of Delaware. They made arrangements with a law firm up in the city of Wilmington where we pay them a retainer fee. And what they will do is we will give them a list of projects that we would like to do and would like to use the funds for. And then they will come back, they will research it, and they will come back and they will either say, yes, you can, or no, you need to look at other things. The other thing we have is Chief Cooper, who is an excellent grant writer for applications, and he has gotten the town several grants. And also, I'd like to thank Representative Urick, because he has provided us with funds also. So unless you have any questions for me, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to the chief.
Any questions for Mr. President?
No? Chief?
Hey, Chief.
Thank you. Good evening, President, Vice President, and members of the commission. I'm Chief Cooper with the Viola Police Department, and I wanted to express my gratitude for the $10,000 grant that was provided to us earlier in the year. It's actually, especially as a small town, very small police force, resources and funding are always hard to come by. I mean, we're pretty excited that we have a toilet now. That's pretty exciting. Drive 5 miles out of town.
They had to drive to
use,
Felton and go to the bathroom.
Yeah. So, you know,
Talk about embarrassing.
yeah, it's very exciting times right now.
1,000-gallon pool right there. What the heck?
I think I gotta write myself a ticket.
Mr. President, you couldn't offer the facilities?
Well, actually, I think Carl had made
There you go.
facilities available, because that's where the police cars were parked anyhow, so.
That's right.
A little easier for him.
That's great.
But yes, from I believe the handout that we provided earlier kind of gave a rundown of what we've spent the funding on so far. Some of the highlights were we actually got a partition cage, in one of our cruisers. So you know, actual officer safety matters, so we don't have to worry about getting assaulted in the back of our head. We also were able to purchase cameras, so we actually can secure town hall. And the police department and our evidence that's there. On top of that, we were able to acquire traffic enforcement equipment, so we can actually manage our 2 primary roads simultaneously. Because for some reason, a lot of people like to use Viola as a highway between Felton and Woodbridge.
We're the
Yeah.
Route 13 bypass.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So, it's been very helpful, in, getting us the equipment that we need. The remaining amount, we're actually looking at using it to, actually get a, new police vehicle. Currently, our newest vehicle is 12 years old. So, it's actually a discontinued model, so it's harder to get replacement parts for it. So, wanted to express our gratitude.
It sounds like you've used that police grant well.
Yes, yes.
Good.
Very much so.
Good.
So thank you.
Congrats.
So again, on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and the people of the town of Viola, we'd just like to thank you so much. It gave us the momentum that we needed to get started, because we were sitting there and we were looking at this and we're going like, what do we do? How do we get started? And then Betty had heard that the possibility of obtaining a grant through Levy Court would be there, and she asked me what I thought, and I said, go for it, you know. And we were pleasantly surprised when we did get the grant, and we thank you so much, because it now has gotten us moving.
Yep.
And we're just hoping to keep going in a positive direction to benefit the people of the town.
Sounds like both grants came at a good time.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Excellent. Any questions for the president of the council or Chief Cooper?
I don't really have a question, but I was through Viola late yesterday afternoon. Matter of fact, I went by and checked it out, because I knew you were going to be here tonight. And I was impressed. You've done a good job. And I'm just glad that Levy Court could help you make a few steps forward.
Yes.
And I was trying to remember, did that church used to have a steeple?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was
In
missing.
fact, the bell is still sitting in front.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I, you know, years ago, I used to work special duty when I was a trooper in Viola. And you know, of course, rode around the town, 100 times. And I thought the church had a steeple. And
If you look at the white canopy, a little bit down to the left, that's where the steeple is. It's on a cement platform.
gotcha. Yeah.
Now, believe it or not, you'll find this interesting. We have 2 golf balls stuck up near the upper windows. Stuck. Somebody, I don't know if they were practicing their golf swing or what they were doing, but there are 2 golf balls up there stuck in the siding.
How long ago?
That happened, what, last summer?
Oh,
Yeah,
I was about to say, it's
that's
been a
when we
while.
first realized it was there.
You got a little 16-year-old redhead running around here, had to be my son. If he scouts him up, scare him.
I'll keep an eye out for him.
He's got a buddy that lives in town, so he's over there all the time.
Yeah, see if they have Buxton's initials on his ball.
Just got to teach him a lesson. Have to show up a bunch of Saturdays and clean things up. Old school.
Great.
Yeah, but
No other questions? Chief Cooper, Judge Arndt, thanks for coming. We appreciate you guys coming back and showing us
Yep.
everything you did. And to the rest of the town council members, thanks for coming and for everything you do for the town of Viola.
Thank you.
Kent County.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. You know, you started this. This is not exactly code. All righty.
Commissioner Hall, do you have any questions?
Jody Sweeney.
Hal? Commissioner Hal.
Commissioner Sleepy.
No, I'm fine.
Appreciate you.
Any public comments? Any public comments on either of these two topics?
Is anyone on WebEx who wish to address the Levy Court on these matters that were discussed? *3 on your phone.
Thank you.
Or raise hand icon on your computer will bring you into the room.
I see no hands. I'm sorry. I do see a hand raised. Tyler, Anaya, you can unmute your line and give your name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Tyler Anaya. I reside at 103
Tyler.
East Howard Street, Viola, 9979.
You can proceed.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a second just to address Levy Court and thank you guys for not only providing funds to the town of Viola, because obviously I live there and I love that. So that's near and dear to my heart. But also Kathy Konevsky and the rest of the food bank for what they're going to be doing, because obviously Kathy, she spoke to having children on the autism spectrum, and as you guys all know me pretty well, I think that's all obviously something that we have in our family as well. So just wanted to just kind of put the word out there that it's a great opportunity to support something that can make a huge difference in our community. So thank you for what you guys do.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
Anybody else, Mr. Kennedy?
I see no other hands raised at this time.
Thank you, sir. This closes the community services. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The next item on agenda is Administration Service Committee. Mr. Angel, Chair, turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Pettinbosch.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Coelho will be addressing this matter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. So, Commissioners, you know this because you're involved in the process. Last year, you requested the General Assembly amend the Delaware Code to specify some duties for the county administrator. And I'm sure you also know that did get approved by the legislature. And then you were kind of in a waiting game, waiting for the governor to sign it. And he did finally do that in September. And one of the things that the new statute does is it provides for the county administrator to appoint department heads, along with all employees, actually. And what this does, this proposal does, is it amends the personnel ordinance to affect that change that you got in the state law. Right now, they essentially conflict. And it also cleans up some other language, removes some positions that we don't have anymore, like the mortgage commissioner. The Board of Assessment no longer exists as it used to. And also makes some other clarifying statements about how the Levy Court might go about appointing the county administrator and the finance director, which are both statutorily required that Levy Court appoint. So that's my review of the change. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Coelho? Ms. Maston.
Mr. Quayle, if this is approved tonight, does that finalize everything for Mr. Pettit-Demange to actually be the lead for the county, with the exception of the finance director position?
So I think I heard your question, getting some reverb in here. Once it's approved after public hearing, which could be at that last business meeting in February, the county administrator would be responsible for hiring and, if ever necessary, terminating a department head where that had been a responsibility of the Levy Court commissioners itself, if that ever needed to be done.
And then the second part of my question would be, am I clear that it would be up to the Levy Court Commissioners if there was a situation concerning the finance director, or, heaven help us, Mr. Pettit-Demange decides to go on to greener pastures, we would be involved in the actual posting, selection, interviewing, hiring process for both his position and the finance director, correct?
Yes, and in fact, you'll be going through that process very soon for the finance director, because I think you all know that she's retiring. So very soon, you'll be interviewing folks and ultimately making a selection for that position.
Thank you.
Mr. Buxton?
Just a point of question, for example, the hiring of one of the department heads, just pick one, it doesn't matter, it's coming up, other than finance. And you said that Mr. Pettit-Demange hires him. Is there a clear process, or is it just Mr. Pettit-Demange sitting in a room that makes the hire? Is there a process? Is there a committee formed? And are any of the commissioners afforded the opportunity, for example, the chair of that department, an opportunity to be on that interviewing role? Can there be?
Well, that's probably a better question for the county attorney, but what essentially is happening to the department heads is they're being removed from the appointed serve at the pleasure procedure and essentially becoming what we would call merit employees.
Yes.
And so there is a process that all the department heads and county administrator himself, so the department head follows when an employee is selected.
I'll let that answer. I guess what I'm worried about, because I support the move, I clearly support it, I understood it, all right? My concern as we get to this point, and maybe there's no sense, there's no opportunity for change, and so for that reason, if I supported it, I'm going to get out of the way, but I want to articulate and understand a little bit. It's complicated. I understand your role in the termination process. I sort of wanted to enjoy the role of the hiring process. If that's not an option, if, for example, I was the chair and we had a new opportunity to hire somebody for Parks and Rec, and I was the chair, does the Parks and Rec's chair have no role to play? And if that's okay, and the commissioners are okay with that, then we need to move on. So no one else has an issue with that? Then let's move on.
Okay. Any other questions? I think the way we did this, we all voted for this. So, but I also think it's a great way to do the evaluation process, how employees are evaluated. So we know that process is working. I think that makes it easier step. Am I right now, Mr. Pettit-Demange?
I think it streamlines it to a certain extent for the commissioners, for sure. Prior to this, you would have ultimately perhaps been involved in additional reviews. You do mine now. You'll be doing the finance directors ultimately.
Okay.
How did the
Sorry, Ms. Buxton?
How is the process for hiring the second in command? Is that working out as a committee, or is that none of my business? Or, the second in command, it's not fair. That's not second in command, my fault. But the assistant to the county administrator, how's that process work?
How's it working?
How does it work? How did it?
Well, it's a hire of the county administrator. So that's,
Singular.
yeah.
You review them, you select who gets interviewed, and then you actually interview them.
Yeah, we haven't interviewed yet, but we will be.
But it'll be
And,
you interviewing the person yourself and you making the decision. Do you expect that to happen the same way for department chair or head?
Most likely, yes.
That's my concern, but, I waited too long to have the conversation, so let's move on.
Any other questions?
That's no disrespect to Mike at all. It's nothing to do with that.
Okay. Move it forth to the business meeting. Mr. Howe?
Yep, I agree.
7 up.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Any public comments on this item? Any public comments? Anybody online, Mark?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Planning Services Committee, Mr. Buxton, Chair, you have 2 items there.
There we go. First one, CDBG. I think Mike's probably going to join us. Nope, Sarah? Okay, both. Here we go.
Good.
Good evening, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Commissioners, Mr. Pettit Damage.
Mr. Miles.
Okay, it's this time of year where the Housing and Community Development Department makes our annual application to the Delaware State Housing Authority for funding for our related programs. I do have a couple bullet points that I'd like to just address quickly. As a part of this year's funding, we will be applying for $250,000 in administration funds from the Delaware State Housing Authority, which is the max that you can apply for. That will require an administrative match of $250,000 from Levy Court as well. This year, we will be applying for a total for the Kent County portion of the application, roughly $945,000 in rehab funds, which is considerably more than we applied for last year. Last year, we applied for $583,000. We're doing this because the money is available and we do have a need going forward. We are also applying on behalf of the city of Milford and the town of Smyrna as well. And in that case, it'll be three separate applications. There will be one for the county, one for Milford, and one for the town of Smyrna. And we've already been through the public hearings with Milford and Smyrna, so they're aware of our intentions, and we're moving forward with the application, which is due on February 24th, 2022. So most of the areas that we're applying for this year are census tracts. Some of these census tracts we've not funded in the past. For instance, Census Tract 40502, which we call rural northwestern Dover, which basically is east of Route 1 to Route 9 from White Oak Road up to Fast Landing Road. We're also focusing on a couple areas that we applied for in FY20, but our allocation for FY20 was cut in half, so some of those areas received less funding. So we do have a need in those areas. Those areas are actually the East Kent County area, which is actually Census Tract 43202, which runs all the way from Newcastle County down to just about Milford. The Magnolia area, which is Census Tract 42202, which runs from Magnolia to more or less Canterbury Road. So those are a couple areas that we have applied for in the past, but the funding was not, for instance, the funding that we got for FY20 for East Kent County area was only $29,000. That's not really going to go far. So with that said, we hope that the Levy Court, agrees with our proposed project summary. And this is all subject to change. And when I say subject to change, you have to have a certain amount of qualified applicants who still need the assistance in certain areas in order to submit an application on behalf of the target area. The Delaware State Housing Authority and CDBG guidelines say that you have to have 4. In this case, we do have 4 units in each of these locations. If at the time that we submit the application and something falls through where we do not have 4, we will probably cancel out that area and move the request for funding into another location. One other area that we've not funded in the past is on page 2. It's emergency roofing repairs. This is a rehab activity which is solely designed to address roofs and roofs only. We think that this will allow us to knock out a number of roofing jobs to bring, you know, homes into better conditions where we don't have any active water leaks. When we do emergency repairs as such, they don't normally always have to go through the bid pack process. They can go through a request for proposal process, which can be a little quicker, so we can get to these activity sites in a shorter span of time. So with that said, the total amount that we will be asking for, the total project funding will be $1.625 million. The way that breaks down, when we apply with the Delaware State Housing Authority for the Kent County portion, we can only spend up to $1.2 million. So we're under that threshold by about, and that includes the administration and program delivery. So we're at about, for the county, $5,000 short of that number. As far as the municipalities go, those are separate, so they're not included in what we apply for with the county, but they are listed here as a total grant funding request.
Mike, let me ask,
Yes.
first of all, nice presentation, really nice job. I'm sure Ms. Kiefer can attest that you certainly have done your very best to excel in this program. And you may have said it, we had the conversation a couple weeks ago. Is the request for staffing increase included in this?
That's why the increase in the admin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the county will have a decision to make on the other end. Well, we probably already made that. And that's because the program is such a good program, but we had a hard time getting the funding out there. The second question might be, if you were king for a day, I'm not gonna ask you to pick them, but if you were king for a day in this program, are there some obvious regulations that don't make sense, that hold you back, that keep you from?
I would say there are, but with respect to those regulations, they're driven by the Delaware State CDBG guidelines.
So then who would you, not you, who would you approach to request that they revisit some of the regulations and why they're sort of choking the program?
Well, some are HUD regulations, and I don't necessarily think that it's in our purview to address those directly with HUD. We would have to address those with the Delaware State Housing Authority, which we have an opportunity to do once a year when we're putting the guidelines together. So for instance, when the guidelines were being put together for FY22, we were allowed to make recommendations to the Housing Authority about what we would like to see that's different. Some of those recommendations are accepted, some are not. And I guess that's at the discretion of the Housing Authority.
Okay, thank you. I would encourage you, keep pushing.
Yeah, and that's what we do. You know, I took a stab at a couple things. I'll give you an example if you have a moment. Part of the regulations for CDBG are if there is a mobile home that's on a rental lot, there is no avenue to replace that mobile home. The only way you can replace a mobile home or a manufactured home is if it's on a privately owned lot. So therefore, that's one situation where we did go to the Housing Authority this past cycle and asked if there was something that could be done about that, and it was not effective.
Ms. Maston, then.
Mr. Miles, question for you. On the town of Smyrna, obviously, is interest to me, but
Yes.
where it has 4 units at 20,000, has it already been predetermined what 4 homes will be repaired?
Well, it's kind of difficult because a lot of the town of Smyrna is older housing stock. We just have to make a best estimate. With respect to the town of Smyrna, we actually have roughly 159,000 existing funding for FY19 and FY21.
Right.
So therefore, that's why I didn't ask for much more with that respect, because we've already got those funding numbers secured for the town of Smyrna.
But is there already a list of applicants that's utilizing those funds, or are you looking for homes?
Oh, we've got a waiting list.
Because people have such low income.
Yeah, we do have a waiting list, and we address people as we can get to them.
Okay.
In certain cases, and I don't know if I brought this up last time, we have folks that, when we take an application, they're under income, and then something changes, and then they're over income. Therefore, we cannot provide them assistance.
Understood.
That happens every now and then, and it's unfortunate. Not unfortunate for them, because they're gaining a better income, but it's unfortunate in the fact that they can't get the assistance they need from us.
Does the same thing then apply also over here where there's roofing, where you have emergency roof repairs, or home repairs? Or I guess roofing repairs most interesting to me, because there are some in Smyrna in the Glenwood development where the roofs are really bad.
Correct.
And they're single parents, they're elderly, and they have very limited income. But there's a list, I'm betting, a waiting list probably for this also.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, we have to pick out at least 4 units. In the case of Milford, we picked out 5, because we've not funded Milford in 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
So therefore, and it's a coin toss if we're going to get funded. I'm asking for the max, because I know we probably won't get the max at every location. So with that said, in the application process, we've already been through Smyrna, and I've picked up 4 new houses that were on our waiting list that we've not applied for before. The Housing Authority would prefer not to see the same houses get applied for each year.
Understood.
Except in the case of, like, for say Milford, since we haven't been funded for so long. So I can go ahead and add a couple of those back to the application, might mix in another one, probably lose somebody who was interested due to either moving or passing away or something like that. So it's always a shuffle of the deck just to try to make things right.
Thank you. Mike, I'm always an outside-the-box thinker, and when you talk about roofing, when you do a roof, you're also talking about the structure, the sheathing and everything underneath that have to be replaced, or just the roof itself?
Correct. Generally, what we do in a roofing situation, if it's on a stick-built home, we'll go in and tear everything off down to the decking. If there's any sheathing that needs to be replaced, we usually put that into our bid. We'll say, hey, these are the specs that we want for the roof. These are the materials we want to use. Include 4 sheets in your bid of plywood in case they need to be replaced, or 3 sheets, depending on the size of the house.
And the reason I'm asking that is, and some people are going to laugh at this, but I understand solar shingles now are available. So that you could decrease the cost of the homeowner, but increase the longevity of them staying in their home and the value of the home. Is that a possibility?
That would be something we would look into. We do look into technologies that better things, but with technology comes cost. The difference you can pay for a regular shingle and a 3-tab shingle and a quality architectural shingle is quite vast. So in our case, what we're trying to do with our clientele is trying to address an issue so they don't have any active water leaks, which would lead to other problems. And in most cases, we specify, at least 25-year shingles, or what they call now lifetime shingles. But that's all based on the warranty of the manufacturer. What I do whenever we do a roofing job, I ask the homeowner to grab the plastic from the bundles that the shingles come in, and take a picture or jot down exactly the manufacturer, the style, the model number, this, that, or the other. So if they have a problem going down the road, they can fall back on that warranty.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason I was bringing it up, because solar shingles, I'm being told, is also 20, 25, and 35 years. And there are programs out there that I didn't know if you knew about it or were going to work with them, just to see if that was a possibility.
We do deal with some of the Delaware Energy folks and Energize Delaware and things like that through the weatherization program. Not to the degree that we've gotten. We haven't really gone down that road, but it's a possibility.
Good, thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Sweeney.
Thank you. Mr. Miles, so Speaking of roofs, what happens 20 years from now if there is a problem with the roof shingles that resulted from manufacturing? Because the homeowner isn't going to show, I paid this much for it, because it was actually the county that paid for it. Is there an issue with that?
Well, what we do typically is we try to get the homeowner copies of our work write-ups that specify the costs and things associated with their job. So they might have a good idea what their
Okay.
the amount of funding that was put into their roof.
Okay.
Because they have to sign off on all of that.
Good.
Moving forward. And most people do ask for copies of the paperwork and things of that nature.
I just had experience with Windswept shipping something, and when you ship something FedEx through Windswept, it's Windswept that ships it, and they won't tell me as the person who sent it where the product is.
Yeah.
Because my name's not on it, Windswept's name is on it.
Typically, whenever we do rehab work on somebody's house, our contractors give them a 1-year warranty on anything that's inside the house. That's unrelated, that's workmanship, that's unrelated to other warranties. When we do a roof, we ask them to give at least a 3-year warranty, because generally if something's gonna go wrong, it's gonna go wrong quickly. And most of our contractors honor that.
Good, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Show of hands, move it forward. Nice work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Yep.
Oh, Commissioner Howe, you in?
Yeah, about, I'll put, yeah.
He's in.
What's this?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. What's this? Why don't you put it, you want to put it up on the wall?
Yeah. Okay, let's turn our attention to, we'll call it the solar ordinance, for lack of a better word. You know, there's been some significant effort and time spent producing this particular document. As I always say, we're here for a kitchen table conversation, right, on a fairly important topic. So if you have concerns, questions, speak now. If there's an underlying desire to inject a moratorium as an option, I'd like to entertain that now. I'm not interested in it, and I don't want to waste our time if the moratorium has enough support to make that happen, because that's what we do. We'd spend a lot of time talking about something that we're going to talk about later. So if there's an introduction of a moratorium, my suggestion is we get after it.
Well, Mr. Buxton, that's exactly what I was hoping that somebody would say, because
Well, I don't want it.
I was not part of this document. I know there's a lot to be said yet. To tell you the truth, I feel that the solar, our utilities need to be pulled out and have as a standalone, and then address it that way. Because let's face it, wind and solar wasn't even thought about when the utilities was written. So I don't know how everybody else feels about it. I didn't go to everybody and ask them about it, but you know, I think we need to have. I know you met with a committee of some people, but at the same time, I think I don't know what we're missing, or if we're missing anything, or what's out there, what the experts are saying, to see what could be added or deleted or changed. I just feel that with the amount of people that are being contacted today, if we don't do something now to try and get this in place, to make sure we have something in place that's for the right reason, we're headed down the same road we just went down. That's why I think it would be great to have some more time to discuss it and look into it.
So a few months ago, I entertained, right, we all did entertain the thought of a moratorium. It was articulated that we could be very effective over the next X amount of time producing ordinances. We rushed to get those ordinances out, and then they were stalled. For whatever reason, they were stalled. So we've had even more time. You've had more time to look into the ordinance. We've all had more time to look at legislation that essentially has been begging for attention from the commissioners to get to this point tonight. My concern with the moratorium is it's a failure in our action. Unless you truly believe that you want to ban solars altogether, which I don't think you do, well, then you've had more than enough time to chew up this document and contact Ms. Kiefer with your clear thoughts and concerns. You just have. That's my thought. So I'm prepared to talk about this. I'm prepared to mash this up. make it an even better document with conversation. If it gets denied, I would highly recommend a moratorium, because if it gets denied, we are wide open.
It's
And we
not,
remain wide open.
first of all, it's not to ban, it's to make sure we can do our homework and continue to look at things. Because let's face it, this is not our forte. It's something that's been thrust upon us because, I don't want to say our inaction of what we've done over the years, but let's just make sure we're doing it right and give us some time. I mean, it's not been that long, really has not, since this started up. And tonight I even issued, I even asked about solar shingles. I mean, there's a lot of things about solar that's going to be coming forth. And we're talking about community, and we're talking about bigger acreage being utilized.
The moratorium, in effect, shuts it down, shuts down the whole pipeline, right? For as long as we decide, whatever we moored.
Whatever. We have one existing community-sized application in. Otherwise, yes, a moratorium would stop. But county attorney can correct me if I'm wrong. Would a moratorium ordinance have to go to the planning commission as well?
Yes.
Okay. When you look at timing then, if we just want to look at what kind of time we have, it can't get on a planning commission agenda until March. So if there, just like last time, if there's talk of a moratorium, any number of applications will likely walk through the door between now and March.
March is 4 weeks away.
I'm simply laying out what might happen. It's not my decision to make.
We talked about the concerns of the gate opening up, people going in. How long ago was how long have we been dealing with the one that we previously just approved? When did that come to the county and get noticed by the constituents? Was it September?
I think it was September.
So September, we were put on notice this was coming. So the reality is, it is on us now. Up until that point, it wasn't on the commissioners to deal with this. But when that showed itself and constituents started calling us and we failed to act, it's on us now. It just is. So that's why I want to act. But I'll leave it for you to, yeah, I'm sorry, Commissioner Maston, Commissioner Hall.
I guess this is really a real passionate topic for me, because I have the east side of 13, and I recognize the importance of farmland. And more importantly, I sat through a Farm Bureau dinner where Senator Carper spoke, and most of you were there, preserve farmland. As a page in the House of Representatives last Thursday, I sat through John Carney's State of the Union speech, preserve farmland. So I'm sitting here thinking, preserve farmland, and yet we're dealing with utility solar on the east side of 13. So what I'd like to see, and I don't know if a moratorium is a good thing, bad thing, but what I really like us to consider is pulling utility solar out of the AC designation, I know that no matter what we do, not everybody's going to be happy in Kent County. And yet I sit here and think, I'm 73, so, I'm not going to be around 25 years. If I am, I'm not going to know what solar is. I probably won't even know how to turn on a light bulb. But my big concern is whatever decisions we sit here and make, they have long-term effect. And I worry about the legacy that I leave for my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, as well as the community here. Granted, I may only represent District 1, but when I sit here and vote, I'm voting for all 6 districts in Kent County. And it really concerns me when I ride through Lipstick, because I go down there a lot. Just like I've probably been to Woodland Beach, because that's my territory, more than I've ever been to Woodland Beach. But I'm just worried that, we really need to look at long-term as to what our decisions are and who we're affecting. And Ms. Kiefer, I would ask you, if we took utility solar out of the agricultural conservation district, what would that look like to us in terms of what available farmland is there for solar? Because I'm betting we could probably still meet their needs, but I just worry. I could say, yeah, I don't want solar on the east side of 13, but that doesn't mean a pittance. But my concern is I just don't think solar belongs, especially utility solar, does not belong in that AC district.
I have a follow-up question. When you say the AC zoning district, do you mean only outside the growth zone?
Outside the growth zone overlay.
Then I would direct your attention to the maps on the screen. And what that is, that's our zoning map, right? And the darker green is the AC zoning. The purple line is the growth zone, right? And those black lines are an approximation of the main transmission lines. And that's where those are is why you're seeing the demand where it is, because it's easiest to connect there. But if you wanted to take that darker green outside of the purple line out, all of that area would be out of play for utility solar.
Ask other commissioners, what are your thoughts?
I think it's what I'd like to see, because I think that's a very important topic of discussion.
Yes, it is.
And it needs to be held once we go through some of this stuff. So let's put that in the box that says, all right, we got to get after that. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, because do you want to present some of the things first, or would you like us to?
We can do that however you'd like.
Well, let's see what Commissioner Howell wants first. But that's a yes.
Second time tonight.
Move over a chair.
Well, short and sweet, I'm not in favor of a moratorium. I defer to staff, provide the expertise to research the region, see what everybody else is doing. Newcastle County's already moved out on this. And I know some of that's reflected in here, and I think Sussex County isn't far behind. And I don't think we need to sit on our hands and say, oh, this is too tough for us to figure out. Because besides paramedics and wastewater treatment, I think land use is our top 3 jobs. And so saying, oh, let's push this out 3, 6, 12, 15 months, we owe it to the people to provide a clear policy. This came out of the blue, kind of blindsided us, I'll give you that, but I think we've had enough time to figure it out. I think we have the expertise on staff, figure out a reasonable way ahead, and I think that ultimately we'll have public testimony to help shape it. And so full speed ahead, that's my point of view.
I'm also opposed to moratoriums. So, Sarah, how many applications are in right now for solar, not including the Piney Creek?
There is just one in the office right now, and
Really?
it's a community-sized.
So we all got the letter from Delaware Electric Co-op today. If you read the letter, Rob Book says that they are buying energy from the Hartley solar farm that we approved. It's 10 acres. They're buying solar power from the Heimlich site, which is 35 acres. That's in Sussex County. They're buying clean energy from Broome Solar. That's in Ocean View. That's 72 acres. But he listed 4 new solar facilities that are to be built near Clayton, Harrington, Felton, and Milford that they'll be buying energy from. What 4 sites is he referring to? Do we not know about those?
Don't know. I know that, and we know this from the engineering companies, there are any number of projects that are waiting to come online, but are not prepared to submit through our process yet.
Right.
So we haven't seen them.
And a moratorium, though, is not going to stop them from coming in, because the RPC doesn't meet until the 2nd and 3rd weeks in March. Then we won't see it back to us to approve the moratorium until after that. So you're looking at April before we see it. They could come in anytime in February, March, and we already know that they are, once they're in the pipeline, we have to deal with them.
Yes, we can't pretend they're not there. The thing to keep in mind in terms of timing is if the Levy Court comes to a consensus on what an ordinance should say,
right,
this can also follow the March timeline if there's a consensus tonight.
You made a consensus on?
What do you want the ordinance to say?
Generally, because we're probably going to get a little bit of public testimony, but I suspect over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to get a lot of public phone calls.
And if you want to delay the ordinance that long, it depends on how you want to proceed, right? If we come to a consensus, if the Levy Court comes to a consensus about what you want the ordinance to say, for example, are we allowing utility solar outside the growth zone in the AC zoning district? That's a very concrete example. That's a thing I can change in the ordinance. And if people are generally satisfied with other items within it, we can have it ready to go for March. But if you want to go through this and then do, for example, another committee meeting to see if you can get to consensus, it all depends on whether Levy Court comes to consensus.
Okay, so I may give Mr. Book a call and find out what projects he's talking about, but in the meantime, I'd rather see some version of this ordinance go through as opposed to a moratorium.
Mr. Pettit-Demange, or Counselor, the line in the sand that was identified back when we were getting sued, Farmers for Fairness, wasn't it an introduction? Do you recall that, the line in the sand when the court said any application moving forward had to move forward at their own peril? Do you recall? And if you don't know that, that's fine, but maybe take a look at when the courts decided. Was it upon adoption? Because I don't recall that. I thought it was actually earlier than that.
You're speaking of the retroactivity?
Yes, when we did the, the APFOs, right?
Yeah, and that was obviously part of the litigation.
Yeah.
We came up with a substantial weight test to determine how far along a project was in the process, beyond which we couldn't pull it back. If it was just an idea that they came in and had a phone call with somebody who never submitted anything, chances are we didn't allow that to proceed. The ones that had already had a meeting with the staff and were officially kind of on the radar, like through pre-application, they were allowed to proceed. That was kind of the test that we used through all the appeal. We set up an appeal process in those days. But ultimately, I think we lost on the issue of the retroactivity.
I was curious where the retroactivity started. Was it when the Levy Court officially adopted it? It's a separate conversation, but it will be relevant to that March, April timeline. And if you could take a look, it would give us an idea of actually what the true timeline is. I had hoped that when it's introduced, I recall something like that mattered. But, all right, so we're getting ready to get into your explanation of what this ordinance looks like. I can tell you that, right, that as many of you already may know, that there have been many sets of eyes from many different spectrums that have reviewed the document and assisted in getting us to where we are, which is a modest compromise. It just kind of is. We've worked from a position that we're not going to get into a debate about whether or not we think solar is real or not. We're going to accept solar in the county. We just are. We're going to get into a position where we feel like the communities are acceptable, right? And we're going to be receptive to the community. You know, so we're going to get out of that fight. Doesn't mean they're going to not face restrictions of sorts, but it's less concerning. And then we're going to look at the utility. We had initially in here started with some limitations on the amount and some requirements, exaggerated requirements, and I don't call them exaggerated, but strong. We now have the potential to pull that out, not necessarily in the growth zone, but outside the growth zone, which further assists the concern that many have on the agricultural conservation-laden side of Route 1. So I think that's where we are. I think that's where you probably want to take over.
Okay.
At the end, we'll chew it up. Thanks.
Okay, so some sort of basics with the ordinance. It does split out utility versus community, right? Utility would remain a full-on conditional use, which means it would go through the full public hearing process. Community, on the other hand, would be handled the way we handle things like home occupations and whatnot. It's a conditional use technically, but it has an administrative approval available to it. It still has to meet all the same criteria, all the same conditions, but they can apply administratively. They provide notice to adjacent property owners, everyone within 200 feet. If no objection is received from those property owners, it can proceed administratively. Yes?
A community is limited to 60 acres. 60 acres and less. Utility obviously is over 60 acres, but there is a limitation on the cumulative number of acres that can be approved outside the growth zone.
In the AC zoning district, as it's written now, it would be a cumulative of 800 acres.
Okay.
Also with limits on effectively coverage of that area.
Sarah, before you go on, Is there anything to prevent two farms, adjacent farms, to applying for, each one applying for a community,
Community solar? Yeah, right.
not utility, community, what's the word?
A community solar facility, yes.
Solar facility. Two farm, and then both farms being purchased by the same entity and then doing a lot line adjustment and creating one big one instead of two small ones.
There would still be restrictions on it, particularly the acreage restriction and the coverage restriction.
But I mean, like you have two farms adjacent to each other and each one of them did 60.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that allowable?
But they're restricted to their usage area. So that would, right, in the language, I think you articulate something to do with community, which separates it from utility because it's not transportable.
Correct. It doesn't
So it's not
feed
as
into the system the same way a utility does. So they don't function the same.
Okay. So that's not something we need to worry about.
We can articulate something else if you want to say you can't be more than two farms connected or something, I don't know.
Do you want distances between community
I mean,
facilities?
you're looking at, in some instances, you could probably have 3, maybe 4 farms adjacent to each other. And some enterprising person buy land on 4 different farms and then hook them all together, and the next thing you know, you've got, 240 acres.
Because it's located in the service area. It makes that a challenge.
Okay.
So the location of it inside the service area, if I understand that to be correct, separates it from becoming a giant, it's a backdoor utility. Because utility
They're
is-
not designed to
they're
be
using the
utilities,
line and
yes.
leaving the service area and going to Newcastle.
Long as we're protected about that, we're not gonna have to worry about that.
We can, if this
That
goes
can
to
happen.
public hearing, you can ask whoever you need to ask. I mean, if you have to change the language, we can change the language to make sure that doesn't happen.
I mean, if you're concerned simply about seeing sort of a density of these in a geographic area, I think Commissioner Buxton's, I think he was getting toward the suggestion of mandate a distance between them,
Yeah, that's fine.
right? And that way, it doesn't matter what side of the meter it is, mandate sort of like we do with off-premise signage, right? So we can look at that if that resolves some of your concern?
It does.
Okay.
The argument came because the folks advocating for utility, if you recall that night, cautioned us against limiting utility because they would by default start hopscotching farms. Right. You start combining community and by default become utility.
Right.
So you're right. The caution is right.
So, Mr. Pepper, you're afraid of a 60-acre community here, a 60-acre right next to it, and then daisy chain them together. But we think that becomes a
If it can happen, if it can happen.
I would worry.
Do something to prevent it.
I think the more pressing concern is not how they're used, but how they function on the ground. And if the concern is whether they're in front of the meter and back of the meter, if the concern is having a density of 60-acre solar farms,
That's my concern.
then I think the answer is requiring a distance between them.
Right. And while Commissioner Maston mentioned a while ago, taking AC out of it and doing that separately. Where are we on agricultural preservation? Because I understand that there is a process that you can take it out of ag preservation by going before some board and then being able to put solar on it.
I would ask if Chris can pull up the ag preservation layer just so people can get an idea. My understanding of the process is if you are in permanent preservation, quote unquote permanent preservation, where they've purchased your development rights, you can buy them back at a premium.
Well, you know,
It's that is the
might be beneficial
process.
to do that in some of these instances for the, you know, I don't know how much that premium would be, but sounds like some of these companies are willing to pay premium prices for land.
It's not, it is a possible thing. I can't speak to likelihood, but it's not out of the realm.
Is there any way we can prevent it?
By not allowing it in a zoning district, that's your role. If you don't want to allow them in specific places, make the call, and we won't.
So Sarah, even if we exclude it, they would have to go through a zoning change, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I
still
mean,
have a way
that's,
around it.
There's always a way. But zoning is purely legislative. That's your call to make.
right.
Yeah.
And
Not
that's
prohibited.
more difficult than it being acceptable use.
If it's a
with
conditional use, you're
conditions.
effectively saying this is a thing we accept in the county.
Yeah, with these conditions.
Right.
But if it's a zoning change, that's a different ballgame.
You're saying it is not permitted in the zoning district assigned.
Right.
Right, but it's not prohibitive from getting a zoning change done because we've had plenty of zoning changes also.
It's at the discretion of the Levy Court.
I like that idea myself.
Okay.
What's that? Say it again.
Taking
out of
Yeah.
Forcing them to go through a zoning change if they want
Well,
to.
and the ag preservation land,
Right, yeah.
you know, make them go for a zoning change.
And that's for utility scale.
That's not community,
Right.
right? Okay.
So just a reference for the folks in the audience and maybe those folks listening. We're here to discuss, chew up, have good conversation. Public comment comes at the end. And then if this moves forward, obviously would be public hearings. So that would be the opportunity for folks that are concerned to be able to show at a public hearing. And of course, you could always approach your commissioner, you know, during the weeks that follow. So that's just an FYI for anybody. So you want to move on or?
Yeah, sorry.
If I could just, because this will color some of the other conditions, is there consensus that public utility solar will simply not be permitted in AC outside the growth zone?
Yep.
Is that, okay. Because a lot of the conditions are designed to be, on one hand, specific to AC outside the growth zone, so that all goes away. The ordinance is going to look a little bit different. We did suggest, and this was based on Newcastle counties, that for a utility solar, you limit sort of the coverage of the solar panels to 85% of the area. That's actually directly out of Newcastle County's ordinance.
85% of the acreage parcel that's being considered. Okay.
And then we've listed a number of setbacks, ranging from 75 feet for side and rear, an additional distance from any off-site dwelling to get a little bit more distance. Most notable, what we call for is a minimum of 4 rows of trees within those setbacks. And I know there's been some concern about whether 4 rows is enough or too much. I would suggest that what the ordinance also says is all of your planting requirements that you have can count toward planting your buffer. We're not going to have nobody's going to have a problem hitting those 4, just given our planting requirements. It does call for soils testing. The language is similar, or if not exactly the same, as the condition placed on Cedar Creek last week. And also includes specific language for abandonment, decommissioning, and then the financial surety for decommissioning the site. Also looks very similar to the conditions that were part of Cedar Creek. I would point out to you an item of, I think, important discussion. In conversation with some of the solar developers, the suggestion was made that the value of the surety also account for the recycling value. So effectively, it costs X to decommission a site and take it back to what it was. But X would be reduced by Y based on what the market would pay to recycle the panels. I think that's an important question for Levy Court to consider, because I don't know that the market for recycling has been around long enough to be reliable. So you may or may not want to include that.
Yeah,
And then you go ahead.
back when we were having discussions, one of the issues came up with the materials being used inside the panel. And as long as the panels doesn't have, its integrity broken, it's the fully functioning panel that, does its job. But as it gets recycled, and then, so effectively we'd be
Excuse me, Jeff.
subsidizing.
Would you mind
Oh,
speaking in the
sorry.
mic? We had some folks say they can't hear you on the line.
Oh, sorry. So effectively, we'd be subsidizing or incentivizing recycling of these things. But it kind of, it's not that we have control over it, but we don't know what the end result is, because then the company's going to sell it somewhere else, and they'll use it for a while and sell it somewhere else until someone gets handed the hot potato at the end, and it goes in their waste stream and maybe pollutes, because at some point it will break, right? And it'll go into a landfill, get smashed, and then you got these, various chemicals released. And so we just don't have to be part of that. And I don't think we need to incentivize it. I mean, what we're doing here really is we're reining in solar to a responsible level, and I think that we don't need to incentivize through the recycling credit. We just tell them, we want a bond for the full price of decommissioning, and we're not gonna worry about recycling. We're trying to figure that out. And, this is the time to do it, because we can just write into the, in fact, what we do is we just take that part out, yeah. So, that's all I wanted to say.
Mr. Sweeney.
Sir.
But we need to talk about that one.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to see some type of report from the owner of the property or the manager of whatever solar after a natural disaster to say our panels were not impacted, there was nothing released into the ground, which might come from public safety if, after some kind of natural disaster. If that tornado had gone, instead of up 13, had gone the easterly route up Route 9, it would have hit this solar facility. Somehow we need to know whether or not there was some kind of environmental damage, correct?
Be helpful.
Okay.
Good idea.
Second thing is, Sarah, out of these 9 conditions that you list here for utility, how many were met by Piney Creek?
By Cedar Creek?
Yeah,
You mean-
Cedar Creek.
All of them?
Okay.
And then some.
Is that?
Actually, they went a little bit past
They went past.
on a couple.
Yeah, they actually went beyond. They have a mile of buffer with 8 rows of trees. They went beyond what
Okay.
the draft was.
Thank you.
Which is a request we can make during a conditional use approval. These are
If-
minimum standards.
If it stays in AC, we can always set conditions that are more restrictive.
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
sorry.
We probably want to better understand so we can get a working document. Do you understand what Commissioner Hall has asked for? So right now, we just have a bland, simple, this is what it's going to cost at the end of the day with the bond, and then there's in there, correct, a 5-year kind of adjustment potentially?
Yeah, 5-year review.
And so the solar facility folks, we'll call it, made a recommendation that we change the language a little bit, is that right?
They did. They had asked for consideration that the recycling value be factored into whatever the surety amount had to be.
And they're calling and your concern is the recycling may change hands 3 times, and then we lose control?
Well, it just gets our fingerprints off of it, and it's just one less incentive or subsidy. I hate,
Right.
you know, because I don't see why we have to do that.
I think the thought, and so we can take it out and wait to hear, because I'd like to hear from somebody about that one. I had not heard that one. Nobody's articulated that with me. I want to keep the space for me personally that the folks that are bringing solar to the county are not the enemy, and we don't want to be over-regulated. We want to recognize its impacts. We want to hear from the folks here, and we want to try and marry the two. So I would like to know what they think and how we can answer your concern. And if we can't, then so we're going to take it out unless they can answer it, is my recommendation. And maybe they can't, and just leave it there, leave it alone.
So Sarah, their request, say it's $80,000 to, for the bond that will decommission the site at the end of the 25-year life of a solar farm. They're saying that $80,000, we're going to get $15,000 in when we recycle these panels, so they only want to bond $65,000.
Correct.
Because most, what I'm hearing is these panels that are currently sitting at about 22% effectiveness, by the end of 2025, they're going to be at 35%. But at 22%, they might only be 8% at the end of and they sell them to the Middle East. And the Middle East buys so many of them, and they've got desert that they can put hundreds of millions of these things and still get the benefit out of them. They're not recycling them and throwing them away, so.
Right. But eventually they will.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Somebody else will, not us.
Right.
Or not the county.
No.
So we'll take it out with an option to put it back in if they can better explain. Maybe they can reach out to anybody listening, call Commissioner Howe.
In 5 years.
Did you hear me? I said
Yes,
Howe.
I heard that.
I'm okay with that.
Well, I'm rather busy, but
Yeah, I hear you,
No, he's
brother.
listening,
He's
yeah.
I'm
listening.
rather busy, but I
Well,
was
you're-
trying to say something, but you know.
Hey, fire it up, buddy. What do you have?
Give me the floor for something.
I'll give you the floor.
Well, I lean toward this, this proposed ordinance draft, but I do have this gnawing doubt that we're leaving something out. Something isn't being addressed that needs to be. In principle, I agree. All of us see that solar is here to stay, right? No argument there. So establishing some parameters is very reasonable. That's really what we're called to do. And as far as recycling of the panels is concerned with Cedar Creek, it's built into the agreement that they're responsible for the panels whenever it's taken down. We don't have to worry about that. We just have to make sure that we're not stuck with it, even though most of us will be dead by then. But that to me should be part of the ordinance. That whoever owns the solar farm, whenever it's taken down, is responsible for every aspect of getting rid of those panels. Other than that, I have a fairly positive attitude towards this.
Yeah. That's the cradle to grave. I'm sorry, go ahead. That's it?
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's it for me.
that's the cradle to grave theory that, that they give birth to it and they put it backward in the ground. So if that's not articulated, if we can do something better, that sounds good. All right, so we chop some more wood. We're getting further along. I need to get to that. One of the things, so you're going to probably get a call. Some folks are going to be concerned about AC and eliminate it. There is the other side of the coin. You shared a conversation with some landowners who want to enjoy the ability to do solar. So I think we're working towards that. We're trying to figure it out. The soil test. There's been some pushback on the soil test because they're not the folks who would have to implement it, are not clear. Here's what I've explained to them. And President Pepper articulated it last week when he said 25 years from now when he comes back, he wants to see these things. He's going to show us that, in fairness, he's going to say the proof will be in the pudding. So your response addresses that. And then I think the soil test has, in a way, it's a modest request. We need to take a sampling of the soils as it currently exists, looking for contaminants that you would naturally find in the soil that have no relationship to solar panels. And then you identify any of the contaminants that, if you ripped one up in front of anybody and then poured water all over it for 24 hours, what contaminants would be present in the soil? If they're maintained properly, the argument is nothing, because they'll never leach. Well, that's fine then. So then when we retest in 5 years, you're probably going to see a soil that is improving. And you're going to see no evidence of any contaminants that are found in any solar panel. Here's why I'm so hard on it. I received an email from some folks in the industry that said, as long as these things are properly maintained, they'll never leak or leach. Well, that tells me they can leak or leach then. Exactly. So, and no, we're not going to be in the business of inspecting them every 5 years. That's your job. What we want to know is in 25 years, when I hang out with Terry, I can say, see, I told you we're okay. Or he can kick me in the butt and say you were wrong.
Well, if I could speak to that.
Yeah.
So when I read this, I agree that we need it, but I don't see the hammer. So we get a soil test done, and suddenly there's contamination of chemical X, and they deliver to the county. We're going to go down and shut the power off.
I think that's a DENREC conversation in a hurry.
Yeah.
If we don't have any teeth in this, then we might as well take it out.
Okay.
Now, I'll stop there because I don't know what the teeth ought to be.
County administrator and I actually talked about that this afternoon. The hammer the county has is you have conditional use approval. And the general language for conditional use is you follow all the conditions. And if you don't follow all the conditions, then we can revoke your conditional use. And I think that plus DENREC's enforcement arm, if we've got an actual problem of chemicals leaching into the soil, I think those two things become very motivating.
All right.
So if they do come back 15 years from now with a soil test that shows that barium is being leaked into the ground from a string of panels that failed manufacturing process, we get that report here because we're asking for it. We immediately turn it over to DENREC or the EPA for some kind of action.
I think a number of things would happen. One, we would have to bring it to Levy Court to discuss. We have violations.
Okay.
We would also, given our expertise is not environmental, we would immediately share it with DENREC. They're the ones who know these things.
All right.
And I argue back that we've been told by anyone, well, everyone has told us who's on that side of this issue, that they are exceptionally environmentally friendly with no chance of any harm. So as long as the testing that we're asking for is a modest test, and I think that's got to be somewhat simplistic. They're like, well, we don't know what we're measuring. First thing you do is get a baseline of what's in the soil because you don't have solar panels there. Then you identify what's in a solar panel that could possibly, as I said, that's what you're looking for. It's not hard. All right. And again, they have a couple weeks to explain to us why it's impossible. And I don't think it is. All right. Moving on.
I've got a question I've been asked. I just want to hear it out loud. How does the taxing structure change when it goes from farmland to solar? I mean, it doesn't stay as
Rollback tax.
rollback 10 years.
Rollback tax for 10 years, right?
Yeah. Okay. But then it's a different taxing structure, right?
Yeah, the entire property is taxed, is subject to the full tax. It's not subject to the ag land assessment any longer.
Right. It's discounted to the farmer during the use of farmland, but once it's no longer farmland, it's got to go back 10 years and pay what the farmland would be, no longer farmland, would be whatever it's called at that time. So, but it's called a rollback tax.
Yeah, well, that's what I understand, but I just wanted to hear it out loud and.
It's not in here, is it?
Because we don't handle taxation. We don't do taxation in the zoning ordinance.
What I mean, just so.
No, it's not relevant to our code, but.
They understand that.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's informative.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear it out loud, so.
So, Ms. Kiefer, is next, or?
Okay. So we've got through abandonment, decommissioning, the surety. That's pretty much it. As it's written right now, it would require, utility would require a site plan and ACAR and BG. The conditions for community solar are exactly the same. There is a suggested limit for community solar outside the growth zone in the AC zoning district. No more than 1,000 acres would be committed to community.
That mirror
So we would
Newcastle.
limit that total in that dark green area. Outside the purple line would be limited to 1,000 acres of solar.
But that's been suggested, but it's not in the ordinance as it's written right here, right?
No, it's written.
Oh, okay, I'm looking at the letter, not the,
No, don't look at the memo, look in the ordinance. It's page 4.
Specific to community.
That's
outside
specific
the
to
growth zone.
community. Otherwise, the conditions are pretty much identical. The setbacks for the AC zoning district outside the growth zone are slightly greater than the balance of the county, but by and large, they mirror.
Okay.
Same soils test, same decommissioning, all the same stuff.
So,
And again, the approval process is the normal administrative one.
two things. We've got some adjustments to make that you're clear on.
Yep.
We can clearly, over the next week or so, whatever it takes to get on an agenda, what have you. This goes to,
Planning Commission?
right.
It would have, once it's introduced, we can schedule it for Planning Commission, and then it'll come back here.
So that gives ample opportunity for you to have conversations with the community and others, and make suggestions. I would reach out, to Ms. Kiefer. Obviously, we can't make changes without us, but we can do it that night at a public hearing. We can make a simple adjustment. If it's a major adjustment, you might want to, but I think we can keep the ball rolling, is what I'm saying, rather than bring this back to committee again for another change. There are some minor changes that we can make, listening to constituents, that could occur, within reason.
As long as it's within the title of the ordinance, yes. You can make amendments after the hearings.
Okay.
And if you want help crafting them, call me, and we'll get it sorted out. I do have a follow-up question, if that's
Sure.
okay. Commissioner Pepper's concern about sort of the density of community solar, do you still have that concern if community solar in that area is limited to 1,000 acres? Okay, I just want to make sure.
So just in terms of process, so it goes through the planning commission, then comes back to us. How drastically can we alter what comes back to us before it's got to go back through?
I will always defer to the county attorney, but it at the very least has to be within the title of the ordinance. You can't go outside of it.
Oh, okay.
We can move 1,000 to 2,000.
Exactly.
Or to 500.
But we can't come up with some entirely,
Don't rewrite the entire thing. Yeah.
okay.
The other thing to keep in mind is ordinances can change. They do all the time,
thank you.
right?
So my question was going to be, number one, ordinance can change. If we do this now and it's approved in March and we find out in March of '23 that, wow, that was really restrictive, not what we wanted, or it was overly generous, we need to do an ordinance change. But also, we have the variance process that they can go through a variance process to ask for any variances from any of the conditions that we set. So
Okay.
we can always change the ordinance.
All right, and we agreed to not allow the utility level solar and AC? Because I'm going to put that out on Facebook and ask, because I've heard two different things, two different points of view, so I just want to collect as much input as I can get. But I just want to confirm that that's what we,
And that's just outside the growth zone, right?
outside the growth
Okay.
zone, yeah.
I'm not agreeing to that,
Agreeing to what?
to excluding utility size solar farms outside the growth zone.
That's all right. That's why we got.
So you do want it, you do, so so in your opinion, AC should be able to do a utility
Yes.
outside the, okay.
Well, I'm gonna enjoy watching you lose one finally.
It's been a long time.
I've
hasn't it?
already counted those votes.
Tired of losing, man. It's gonna be nice to see some else lose. I think we've probably chewed this up enough because I know there's some folks who probably want to speak, some folks on the phone. Okay, Commissioner Angel wants to talk, but let me ask you, so as far as administrative approval, we've articulated that fairly clearly for community with no objections.
Right.
Right, okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah, I agree with some of the things that have been said tonight, but I'm just going to get it out there for the record, of course. The county's primary interests outside the growth zone, our overlay district, is to preserve agricultural and rural infrastructure and protect environmentally sensitive areas. Having said that, I'm for farmers farming, and I'll try and do everything I can to keep them farming. But if they are going to be using their solar, your fields are being utilized, and they're still farming, I think they should reap the rewards of the electric that their farmers are giving out to help them continue. I mean, may not be much, but every financial thing to keep them going is a plus for me.
What do you
Just
mean?
to throw it out.
What do you?
Financially, or should they be able to get on the grid that the electricity?
Their electric would be provided on their land.
It doesn't work that way.
I understand it. I'm just throwing it out as I said, I'd like to keep farmers farming if they're giving up part of their farmland to help the community. Now, having said that, what's still missing? There's still something that either I'm missing or that's why the moratorium, and when I say this, and I mean, I'm going to be blunt. When I first became a commissioner, I put a moratorium in to get basically the adequate public facilities ordinance. If we had not done that, it would probably be a different animal now. And two commissioners sitting here came on the coattails of that coming in. So, and we had a discussion. It went to the Supreme Court. We won on that. It took some time, yes. But I don't think it's going to take that much time just to have more discussion and have a better look at this. You're right. Public comment's going to come forth. But I still think there's something's missing, and I have to say that, so.
Any other comments? I think it's a good time to probably, you got enough information there, Ms. Kiefer?
I
correct?
believe so. Thank you.
All right, so what I'd like to do now is a show of hands to move this forward under the understanding of what we've articulated, right?
For introduction.
For introduction, correct. Okay, Commissioner Howe. Commissioner Howe,
Yes.
are you in favor of moving this
Yeah.
forward? Okay, so we've got a show of,
Yes, I am.
okay, great, 6-1 to move it forward. We're done with that. Looks like
No.
it's, yes, sir, you want to say something?
No, I just want to make sure you heard my yes.
Succinct is the word you like to use. It was yes. So now what I'd like to do now is to turn it over to public comment. So at this point in time, if anybody wants to come up and have, express their thoughts, you're more than welcome to do so. Approach the podium is what I'll tell you. And if more than one comes, obviously just work your way to the podium, take your time.
We just ask that you state your name and address for the record, please.
I have a problem with that.
Good evening. My name is Dustin Thompson. I am a staff at the Sierra Club Delaware chapter. I just wanted to kind of bring up a couple things that came up during the conversation, and one was actually, I'll start with your concern around the daisy chain effect. The state actually considered that issue, and it's in regulation. They're not allowed to do that. You cannot have adjoining parcels that are purchased for community solar by the same entity or its affiliates, and to be used in aggregate of 4 megawatts. And so you can have 2 here and 2 here, but you can't have 4, 4, 4, 4 on down the line. And you cannot subdivide parcels and do it kind of post fact.
So Dustin,
Yeah.
our conditional use process doesn't go through the state. Do they have a separate process that they have to go through to get approved by the state for?
Correct.
Sarah, do they have to get approved by the state first?
Yeah. They have to
get approved by the state.
But we can hijack the
But
language.
but co-location is strictly prohibited in the statute. And so you cannot operate community solar facilities because you have to have a arrangement with the Public Service Commission and with Delmarva, all of which in the tariffs and in the interconnection and the Public Service Commission approval for the applicant to get even just pre-certified to then be able to go get your land use permits and all sorts of procurement and things of that nature. You can't co-locate.
Okay.
Is what that's
Thank
called.
you.
Yeah. But anything else on that before?
No, it's
Okay.
useful.
Nope, thanks.
Yep. And I can send you the section.
And
Sent to Ms.
Sarah,
Kiefer.
Sarah,
Yeah.
look at that to address it.
Yep. So the other point that I would just make is that in terms of the AC, and I'll just be brief on this. I mean, I will say that utility solar comes in different shapes and sizes. It's really more about who's purchasing the power, whether it's going into the grid at a wholesale rate, or if it's behind the meter that I think you had mentioned being used for the farmer to produce its own power, self-consumption, or community where you have a group of stakeholders that are buying the power from the area. So utility solar could be a megawatt, 20 acres, or it could be what you guys have just dealt with Cedar Creek. So it may be something to consider to limit the size like you did with community solar and how much acreage could be used in a single project and then not allowing co-location. That might be a middle ground between, that would still keep out, mega hundreds and hundreds of acres while still allowing like DEC, right, to create a project within that AC district. So just something to consider. The real concern that I have actually is on the community solar side, because I helped write that, and so it's obviously near and dear to my heart. Those projects operate on an extraordinarily thin margin because they're selling discounted power to communities to help them save money on their electric bill. That's the whole idea. And you're actually required to help 15% of the power you create has to go specifically to low-income communities. And so often they're offering them even higher discounts to low-income individuals. And so the margin is real thin, unlike utility solar, where you're operating on a much wider margin because it's so cost-effective, often because of the size and the scale. So that being said, while it's great that Cedar Creek was able to plant, 8 rows of trees around their perimeter that wasn't already forested, and completely fine with utility size doing 4, because I think most of them can shake that out, particularly if they're a larger size where you're going in the growth zone or wherever you guys end up doing it. But on this community size projects, particularly where it's an actual community, like a group of farmers getting together to do a shared project, where it's smaller than that 4 megawatt maximum size, the margins are going to be razor thin for that in order to save money. Now, if they want to get together and create a project knowing they're going to pay a little bit more, then they just want to do the right thing. They want to use solar and kind of aggregate their usage. And they're okay with paying a little bit more, then that's fine. But most of the time, the goal is to save money. And so you're really operating on a pretty thin margin. So having 4 rows of trees around the entire perimeter of community solar, you're essentially going to stop community solar from coming in because they're not going to be able to afford that and still offer a discounted electric rate to their subscribers. So what I would suggest and kind of offer up is to do what most jurisdictions have done regarding community solar, and it's the 2 rows on any perimeter that is facing, residential or highway, other land uses where you have, neighbors to consider, sight lines to consider. But if the back of it is backing into, the next parcel's wooded or something like that, where it's, there's a gap in between, right? But there's no land uses happening on the other side that maybe not require, if they want to go ahead and add more trees. Look, I'm from the Sierra Club. I wanted more trees.
Like I'm
right.
a little confused here at this.
I know this is a weird line.
Trees.
This is a weird line to walk. I'm telling you. But more importantly, I want to see that balance of being able to help folks lower their energy burden and get these community solar projects into Delaware, benefiting the communities that we wrote the bill for. And so that's why I'm asking that we drop that back down to 2. And even better would be to really focus the requirement on those that are going to be, dealing with sight lines and neighbors. And that's an industry standard nationally.
There is a process that allows them to ask for a variance from the 4
Yes, sir.
rows to 2 rows because of the size of the project or that they're only serving a very, very small community. So there's a process for them to go through. It costs a little bit extra, but
yes, sir, and I do understand that.
Okay.
My concern is that, there's a lot of heat right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if a waiver is going to fly real well on any projects in the next couple of years. So, if it ends up being a problem, like you said, you can always come back and adjust it. But it is the standard kind of nationally to have those 2 rows of those trees of that size with some berm or whatever's needed to kind of augment that.
So you presented something, Ms. Kiefer, you're paying attention, because it resonates a little, catches a little bit with me. What I'm thinking here is community, we're speaking specifically to community. And what you did was offer up a suggestion that require the 4 where it's obvious. The goal is to make it disappear from the street or a house or other. But if it backs up into whatever, maybe lessen the requirement. That's something to consider looking at. I mean, that's not an unusual ask, especially given its community. And if we're not offended by community, that's a fair ask. Yeah. You could take it another step. Maybe you go community and outside the growth zone still has to do 4. Inside the growth zone, maybe you get the option. I don't know, but that's not an unusual. I think maybe present that in an email.
Absolutely.
Discuss that.
Yeah, like I said, my goal is to just make sure the program does well and helps the folks that need the help that we wrote the bill for. So I appreciate you giving me the time.
Mr. Buxton, can I ask him a question?
Yeah, sure.
Good evening. Along those same lines of thinking, I heard what you were saying about reducing the number of tree plantings, reduces the total project cost, and makes it better for ultimately the customers. Takes some of the cost off the project. That was your primary reason, correct?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm only speaking about the vegetative screening.
Yes, understood.
Yeah, so the tree planting that you guys require, love it.
Yeah.
Don't want to change anything about that. This is really just focused on those larger trees that are required for the screening.
I get it. Let me get to my question. So my question is, along those same lines of thinking, do you think that and I'm speaking solely about the community solar, that the 5-year testing requirement and the expense associated with that is worth it? Or is it something that could be along the same lines just for the community solar, smaller scale projects, would not necessarily be needed or would be an added cost on the operator that will be perpetual and probably substantial if it's, a complete test. Do you think that's worth that?
My
cost?
personal opinion and kind of industry opinion, I would say, is that the soil testing is a little bit of a limited value just based on the size and area that you're talking about and what you would need to do in terms of testing to, visual inspection. And honestly, if a panel is, even one panel is damaged, the operator is going to know because the output changes more than it would within just a normal, cloud coming overhead because it often impacts down the daisy chain line. And so if one panel is damaged, it often is impacting the conductivity of multiple panels. So I will say damage is often noticed pretty quickly by their operators because the goal is to make as much power as possible, to make as much money as possible, provide the service that you're contracted to in the case of community solar. Now, that being said, for the community solar, financing is not going to be stopped by that requirement. The cost of doing that is not going to immediately deter financiers from giving the money necessary to start creating the project for community solar. The tree planting, though, if you look at a 60, they're not going to probably be 60 acres, but let's just say that because that's the number in the ordinance. An entire perimeter of four rows of trees deep, 6 feet high, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars added cost, and something that's operating on a very thin margin. That is going to, if not stop finances, make it incredibly difficult to get a financer on board because it's not adding any real value to the product. The customer is not saying, oh, there's 4 rows of trees there instead of 2. I'm going to go with that project even though it's more expensive. You know, understand what I'm saying? So the soil testing is not going to stop a project from moving forward. I question not necessarily the value or the necessity, but that's a policy decision for you guys. But the financing is not going to be impacted.
Okay, I must have misunderstood your original point. I thought you were concerned mostly about the customer and the cost that ultimately the customer pays for, and whether or not, you know, there's a value there with solar, trying to reduce the cost. And so my point was, would it be, you know, from an environmental standpoint, testing that may not, I mean, a 50-acre site, if it's, you know, a thorough test, it could be, you know, considerable amount of money every 5 years that will get passed on to the customer versus an upfront one-time cost in trees that provide environmental benefit, but it's a one-timer. So that's the reason I asked the question, and just wanted to get from the environmental angle, what you thought was more important, trees or testing. And, you know, the county owns a solar complex. I don't think we've ever tested it.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
The financing is ultimately going to impact what the cost is for the subscription. And so, well, one, if you can't get the financing, there won't be a subscription. So if you're looking at, you know, what's the added value of the trees for the customer and the financier, there really isn't one. And so, you know, the goal of the screening is to be a good neighbor and to make sure that people aren't looking out their window or driving down the road and seeing a solar facility, right? I mean, that's the goal. Does 4 rows accomplish that more than 2 rows? And does having it around the entire perimeter accomplish that any more? Or is it just adding more cost and we're going to make it more difficult to finance? At the end of the day, from what I'm being told by folks that build these projects, the soil testing isn't necessarily, now it depends on how you guys administer it probably, because the wording is a little bit ambiguous, but how you process that and deal with that is going to impact financing, but not to the same degree that the trees are going to. And again, I understand it's a very weird line to walk for a Sierra Club person to talk about not trees. So just to be clear, we love the trees. So.
It's an honest presentation.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Commissioner Bucks.
I'm sitting right on top of
Hello.
Good evening. Paul Cartanza Sr., 6289 Bayside Drive. My comment is the AC, you cut our hands off once, as I told you before with Route 1. You could cut the hands off again, and it's not going to make any changes because you're still putting the haves and have-nots. Wherever they want it is where you're going to have it. You know, you got people that are on one side, unless people already knew about it, and then they were out there already prospecting to buy land on that side so they could put their own solar in. We have to really look at what we're trying to do here. You just said the governor wants farmland preserved, not put industrial electric on. You've got plenty of areas everywhere else that you could go with these. Soil sampling, we're talking about soil sampling. Soil sampling is $4 or $5 a pop. It's not going to break the guy. You're talking about community solar. But the community solar is going to be the same thing as utility, because if he's got more power, he's going to sell it. So, you know, we're wish-washing back and forth. We talked about the utility or the community solar for being 25 to 30 acres. I think the first time we talked about it, Eric, was that acreage. Now we're up to 60 acres. And now we're up to a total of 1,000 acres. How many directions are we going to go in here? You need to get yourselves and get right on where you're going to wind up with all these things.
This is the process for getting.
I understand it.
And your conversation helps us to articulate it. So when this is over and you want to get in touch with me and we can work down the numbers, we can do that. But this is the way we make Scrapple.
Well, you got to make Scrapple. But like I say, Route 1 came through. You told all of us east of Route 1, no development, no anything. Only ones that got development were the lawyers and the attorneys who knew what was happening, and they were out buying the land on east of Route 1.
So to understand where you are then, because we've effectively denied utility in the AC, you would like us to deny utility period outside the growth zone?
Outside of the growth zone.
I mean, you're talking about solar farm outside the growth zone.
I'm talking, if you're going to allow this to happen.
I just want to know which one, all solar.
All solar.
All solar, community utility outside the growth zone ban.
If you could cut the utility back, or not the utility, not utility, the community. Okay, sure. Let's get straight. Community, I say yes. I can live with community as long as it wasn't over 30 acres, 40 acres max.
But we can do that.
Okay, all right. But you're asking for comments. So here I am trying to give you a comment of what my feelings are. And like I say, it's just, it's a very difficult situation. If it was in your neck of the woods, sitting across the street from you, yeah, I don't think any one of you guys would be very happy with it being across the street. You're looking at it every day. People come out of Jersey, Philadelphia to come down here to look at the woods, the trees, no taxes. So we're just trying to save a piece of what we've preserved. I've preserved my own farmland to help, because they're not going to develop out there. I knew that was not going to happen. But you still have the haves and the have-nots when you do these kind of things, because it's going to be this guy or the next guy down the street.
So, Mr. Cartanza, just to play devil's advocate here, I'm looking at everybody here. I think we all live inside the growth zone. I don't have a problem with solar field going across the street from me, first of all. Inside the growth zone, I don't have a problem with it. But you're saying that you don't want it, so don't sell to them. For your land, don't sell to them.
But there again, it's for the haves and the have-nots.
Why? It's your property.
I understand, and I have the right, because I was one of the farmers for fairness. We fought, we could sell our land for what we wanted. But there's a certain time and a certain place that the land can be sold. And when they told us Route 1 was the deadline, was the cutoff point, that's where we had to live with. We got a piece of property right in the city limits of Dover. We can't sell it for development. You guys said we can't develop it, so boom, it's done. I just don't want to see any solar outside of the growth zone where we're at, out there where the AC is at. That's all I'm asking, is to put it where it can be closer to like the gentleman was saying, closer to people who need it. You know, you're trying to sell this utility to Pennsylvania, New Jersey. If it was supporting us in Delaware, if you say this project is going to take care of Dover, Delaware, I say, well, I think it's a little bit, I think we can live with that.
I listed 3 and possibly 7.
I see that, I heard that, but I didn't.
Outside the growth zone, in AC areas.
Right.
That are all going forward, we think.
You think?
Yeah.
But that's why we're trying to do these ordinances, to cut back on what we're trying to do. We can't think about it because,
Cut back, we're trying to conditionally restrict what they can do through this ordinance.
I understand
We're not
that.
getting a moratorium on this.
No, I
And as you
barely
know,
heard this.
Cedar Creek already met all of the conditions that we put on.
And I applaud them for stepping up and battling a little bit more and being able to put a little bit more hedgerows in, because that just means that they're interested in trying to hide what's there. It's not a good thing. I mean, there's people that aren't happy with it, but like I said, I just feel that we need to keep it out of the AC, out of the farming districts. Like I said, the governor says preserve farms. I don't know how you're preserving a farm when you just took 400 acres out of the production area.
Paul, listen, I appreciate it. I know that you helped craft some of the numbers. I know that the numbers don't marry exactly what you said. I told you guys that at that meeting, that things would change and then we'd get back to working a better
But they changed so drastically. I mean, you went from 400 or 500 acres to 1,000 acres just like that. That just don't happen. 1,000 acres just don't happen.
That mirrored the Newcastle ordinance, that's all. That's
Well, but Newcastle, they're half built up with construction. I mean, that's a lost cause, Newcastle.
I guess the hope really was, man, I mean, I was optimistic that the AC and elimination of utility in the AC was going to be a considerable move on our part, and I think it is.
I think if you could do that.
Well, I think that's going to happen. That's what we've already discussed, and that'll mean, I don't see that not. We're talking about eliminating utility in the, outside the growth zone in the AC. That's essentially going to stay in the ordinance, and if it gets adopted, that'll be in play. So that effectively does away with those large-scale projects. You still have remaining the community. You clearly pick up some points where there's a bigger number than you want to see, but those communities, they're not incentivized. I don't think they are incentivized as much to find land outside and away from areas, at least not the ones I've seen, because we saw those in advance, and they didn't try to pop up east of Route 1.
Okay, but see, that's what I had the feeling of, is that this was all out in our area. So, it wasn't determined that, hey, it's only going to go on the left side of the purple line or green line or whatever line you want to show. I'm just, like I said, I'm just trying to say, we're trying to save our farms. We can't farm every acre, but we want to farm every acre. We want to buy every acre, but we have to buy it at a farmer's price. We can't pay $15,000 to $20,000 for a piece of land. I mean, if you want to help me do that, I'll buy all the freaking farmland that there is if somebody help me put a pocket in it.
But what about the farmer that wants to sell his property at $15,000 to $20,000 an acre? Why should he be limited? Because that's what you're asking to happen. You're making you guys the haves and them the have-nots.
We're not having anything because we can't sell anything, and we're trying to keep it on the inside the growth zone is where it needs to be.
But you see right there, the transmission lines are outside the growth zone.
I know. I've lived with a transition line since 1969. I have gone around them in circles. I've sprayed Johnson grass around the poles that they said they would take care of. I had dump trucks put ruts this deep when they were putting the new line in. I have to fix all that. They didn't give me any money. The guy says, well, what did you do with that $200,000 we gave you? $200,000 in 69, what today's value, that's millions. I mean, that 200,000's gone.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, in my opinion, and my focus is to keep it out of the AC, put it inside the growth zone, put it where people can plug in and use the electric.
Well, you're gracious with your time, and I'm going to offer opportunity for yourself, Trish, and anyone else that you want to invite to another meeting, and we can discuss the changes.
Hey, I'm all ears. I'd like to help. I don't want to be the problem. I want to be the solver of the problem.
You did help.
Thank you.
All right.
Any questions?
Appreciate it, man.
Don't forget, if you got some pockets, come help me buy this farmland.
windmills on it. Uh-oh, here she is.
Hello, aren't you happy to see me?
Always. I want
Tr-
to see your notepad first.
My what?
Your notepad.
I don't have a notepad
All
tonight.
right, then you're good.
I'm freelancing. So I'm Tricia Hurd Nash, 3652 Big Woods Road, Smyrna, Delaware, 19977. So on one hand, I'd like to thank you all. I do not want utility scale solar in that ag conservation district. I've expressed that. I appreciate you hearing that. You do that, I'll be happy. Except for one thing. I want you to limit the amount of community solar. I don't like 1,000 acres in our district, in the ag conservation district. Hit me somewhere between 500 and 800. I'll be amenable. Keep in mind that we live there and that is our view, and that we've protected and cared for that land, and that we don't want our view to change. I don't want a farmer that has a house at the back of his property with a beautiful view putting 40 acres of community solar along the road front where I have to see it. If they want to live with it, you're right, it's their land, it's their choice. They can look at it. I don't want to look at it. So keep that in mind. The other thing that concerns me is large properties being subdivided, going through the proper channels, subdividing, and then putting up 40, 60 acres on each subdivided parcel. Many farms that you ride by and look at and you think, oh, there's a beautiful 400-acre farm, is actually 3 or 4 tax IDs. They could actually do that. So I do think that there should be some kind of limit in an area of how much of that can be seen. That's all stuff you can all sit around and work out. The soil sampling, I think there's some miscommunication. I think there's 2 sides to it. So you guys with this Cedar Creek thing, you're saying you're going to return it to agricultural land. Soil sampling to Paul and I is the sample that tells you if it's farmable. It's your pH, it's your nitrogen, they can spout it all out for you. My son and Paul can sit back there and tell you all the things. The soil samples that we want to see are for chemical leakage and also for viability of returning to farmland. There's a lot that goes into maintaining farmland. They need to be responsible for taking a soil sample when it was taken out of farmland, out of agricultural use, returning it to that same agricultural soil sample testing 25 years from now when they want to give it back to us to farm. I'd love to understand this reason. And this is just a personal thing for me. If the idea is to return it to farmland, why take it to begin with? Put it on a parking lot. I mean, but that's getting, off topic. You guys got this dropped on you, and I know you did. Department of Agriculture does soil sampling. It is $4 a sample. You're not talking about a lot. The Sierra Club promotes trees. For God's sake, I had a sticker on my car for 10 years from the Sierra Club that was a pine tree. Plant pine trees.
Does that $4 a sample cover everything that you...
$4 a sample covers the agricultural side.
Usage.
Now, I'm not sure about the chemical, but I know they can, there's got to be a company. You're not talking about a lot. Farmer's soil sample, just so you guys know, farmer's soil sample every piece of ground they have every year to decide what it needs for the next year.
Right.
So taking this stuff out of farmland, out of production for 25 years and sticking basically mirrors on it is not good for farmland. I just feel like we need to be careful. The other thing I do want to mention is if you're going to put something out on Facebook, that's great, but realize that most of the people that own that land out there, they're not on Facebook. And another thing that I've come to figure out that I'm not sure even I understood, a lot of people don't understand the difference in utility solar, community solar. There's agricultural solar that's on chicken houses, whatever you all term that as. There's residential solar. This is not about stopping solar. Right. This is about being responsible with solar. That's something I want to make clear. The other thing is a lot of people that are calling you and they're hearing me say this ag conservation district. A lot of people are zoned AR, not AC. We're not limiting AR districts. Right. Be really careful about, do they really know what they're talking about? And I'm not saying that from a standpoint that I think that people are naive. I'm saying, if you haven't fought these fights, you may not really look at it. So, I mean, like, I have AR and AC. There's things on my land that I've found out through going through this process. I mean, AP10, for God's sake. I looked at that and thought, wait a minute, what the heck is AP10? Why do I have that on there? And this land rights thing, to Mr. Sweeney, you can do whatever you want with your land. There's some, which Sarah might be able to spit out for me, but in an agricultural conservation district, there's a land coverage law that's like 23%. But you're letting a solar company cover 85% of the same piece of land. So if I own it and I want to build something on it, I can cover 23% of it. But if a solar company owns it and they want to cover it up, they can do 85%? Can you explain that to me?
I don't think it's the same thing, is it?
Not the same
It's
thing.
not the same thing. They're not putting solar panels flat on the ground to prevent water from going through the ground.
I don't give a crap. My A-frame pole barn isn't going flat on the ground either. I'm just telling you that,
So the A-frame pole barn, the only percentage is right underneath of the.
and anything you have in blacktop, and
Okay.
anything you do, trust me.
I know.
Anything you
I
do.
fought this law, trust me.
Anything you do, we have laws. Let me tell you, we have laws. And it doesn't seem fair to let these people come in and have a carte blanche. And if you want to go with you can do whatever you want with your land, lift all the restrictions. I own 470 acres that's in the AC district that is not in farmland preservation. Let me do whatever I want with it and see how that goes through this county. You'll deny me in a heartbeat. So let's try it, because I sat in here when Ron Faison tried to put a dirt track next to Pizzadilly's, because my son raced dirt track. And y'all know how that went. And I thought, wow, I don't have any neighbors. I can put in a dirt track, right? No, I can't. It has to be in an industrial setting. How the heck does a dirt track for go-karts and motorcycle-powered cars have to be in an industrial setting, and a utility-scale solar complex doesn't in this county, right here? I can't put in a rodeo. Now my son rodeos. Can't put in a rodeo arena. I own 1,000 acres of farmland. I cannot put in a rodeo arena. But I can put in solar. So to your question of why isn't it fair to that guy that wants to sell his land for $15,000 an acre, which seems to be about where we're getting to, it's not fair because we've all had to live with the restrictions that this state and county has put on us. And we've respected them, and we've lived through them. And now we're asking you to uphold what you've strapped us with and we've respected for all of these years. So, I mean, you guys know how I feel. The Ag Conservation District should have never been looked at for utility scale solar. If you all think this has been a hot argument, try coming closer to me. I'm telling you right now, this is nothing. Because I wouldn't, poor Mr. Goldsboro, there'd be a lawyer here. There'd have been a lawyer there day one. And the other thing I do want to bring up, this 200-foot notification rule, that doesn't work in an ag conservation district. Nobody lives within 200 feet of anybody. That needs to be looked at seriously. That farm that went in for Cedar Creek, I guess Mr. Goldsboro was notified. I own a farm less than a mile away. I wasn't notified. The sign that was put up, your big yellow sign, was face down in the field when I went to look for it. So there's some things here that need to be looked at. And you guys need to look at those too when you're doing these notifications. You have to remember that to you guys, 150-foot setback is a lot. To us, it's nothing. And when you look at that thing and you say, well, that black line is the power transmission line, we're all really well aware of it. In 1969, my family was paid $16,000 to come through our property. Now, they came back, what's it been, 5 years ago? And instead of having nice little telephone poles, which weren't that obstructive, we now have these huge metal things that look like towers. But guess what? They have the right to do that. And guess what they're going to do now? They're going to run this solar through those same transmission lines. Do you think that my grandfather thought that that's what was gonna go on those utility poles, this is not fair play. We're asking you guys to do the right thing here, and I think you know that, I think we're headed in that direction. But we really need no utility solar in an ag conservation district. You need to be careful when talking to people. Ag residential is different, but that ag conservation district we've all fought long and hard to keep, to protect, it needs to stay that way.
I need to understand where we are.
Okay?
If moving forward a month from now, if nothing changes, we have now effectively eliminated utility in the AC outside the growth zone, which is what you wanted.
Hallelujah.
Correct. So then we're there. What else in here have we not addressed? Because we can't go back and fix it. I get it. We're not going to make you whole.
Can you cap community within an ag conservation district outside the growth zone at 500 acres, since you've already allowed 582 of utility to go in?
That number is definitely in play. So yes, now.
So that's what I'm asking you to do. Look at it and look at it like this. We feel like we lost that. So take that into some consideration with these numbers here.
But I guess what I'm getting at is, I'm trying to understand from you and Paul, who obviously played a role in helping us out here. You like everything in here except the numbers changed. They inflated a little on certain aspects. You love the fact that we eliminated and the numbers changed. So rather than say yes to 500, what I can tell you is 1,000's too much and we need to come off of that, clearly. We're looking for a compromise. What else in here?
Bring that down and be careful. I'm not saying you have to do anything else. Bring that number down. You also substantially upped the number. We were at 25 or 30 acres for community solar. You went to 60. So you doubled the size of what a community solar could be. So you did that, and then we were like at 500 to 600 acres for community solar as an aggregate, and we went to 1,000. So it just feels like you doubled everything.
But I didn't hoodwink you. I told you at that table.
I
this
know,
number's gonna
and
change.
I'm not hoodwinking you. I'm telling you right now.
And I told you, come here tonight.
Yeah.
And you'll have a chance to articulate your concerns. And if you think this is where it ends, it isn't. You're going to get calls tomorrow from those folks who think we've gone too far. So what? We're not going to back down now. We've got a good number to work with.
I mean, taking the utility out of ag conservation is a huge, for me personally, that's a huge thing. We don't need that. That should not have happened. I don't know if it can be stopped now. If it was me, I'd be trying like holy heck to stop you right now.
Well,
that's a problem. It needs to stop.
okay.
Do you have a question?
So doesn't the 1,000 acres go away because it's tied to, that's community solar. So in your opinion, so we're talking about 1,000 acres, but we're talking from the Newcastle County line all the way down to Milford, 1,000 acres.
But if you're saying in AC, you're basically saying on the east side of the Route 1. That's your AC district. You've got that little tiny blip over there. I don't know how that got there. But that big green area, that's the area that I'm talking about.
Okay, because I've been confused, because when they said dark green, I'm looking at the sort of the olive green splotches here and there, but we're talking lime green.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a much better understanding now.
Yeah. So, and the ag preservation stuff drives me a little crazy. It's sort of like double dipping. So, okay, so you owned the farm, and then they came out with this program called ag preservation, and you jumped in and you said, I want to preserve my farmland. Well, now solar comes along. So you're going to go back and you're going to buy it back out, which you're not going to buy it back out. The solar company is going to try to buy it back out of farm preservation, and you're going to benefit again, and then we lose the farmland. You know, it shouldn't be allowed. It's my understanding that it's not going to be quite so clear cut, but it's also my understanding that there's enough money involved that it's going to be an issue if we allow it. If you take this ag conservation district, that bright lime green with that black transmission line running right through the middle of it, you're stopping a lot of that. And that black transmission line is a problem. That's why we're getting hit so hard. That's the problem. That's the truth of it. I mean, and I'm seeing it. And you know, a lot of the problem is also that a lot of the owners are a little older. I know them. I hear from them. It's a lot easier for them to get to me than it is for them to come here late at night when the roads may not be good or they don't see well at night and that kind of stuff. And they're uncomfortable with it. It's just not fair to our area. Now, does a farmer have a right to make an income? You're darn right they do. But do you know what that guy would have made on the Cedar Creek property last year? So take 250 bushels of corn per acre at $6.50 a bushel, and I'm giving you moderate prices for last year, at 580 acres. You're at $948,000. Now take your input costs out of that. But farmers make money. They don't have to sell to solar to make money. They can rent their land to other farmers and make money. They don't
Why
have
didn't
to.
they?
Huh?
Why didn't they? If they can make that kind of money off corn, why didn't they do that instead of going?
Why do
forward?
drug addicts do drugs? I don't have the answer for that. I mean, you know, because farming's not easy, because generationally it fades, but if you are in an ag conservation district and you bought that farm and you knew you were in that district, don't you kind of have a responsibility to the future of farming, your community, and the area?
I love your loyalty to that. I mean, I get that.
And if not, my question to you is, if I wanted to sell it and put houses on it, I can't. Why can I put solar? I'd rather have a golf course, a dirt track, a rodeo arena, a housing development. I don't care what you put there, but I can't do that. You guys are telling me I can't do that, but I can do solar. That's the problem with this. There's your moneymaker. So that's the problem that we as owners in the area have. It's not that I don't want that farmer to get rich. I do. But there's only one avenue for that right now. And that's not fair to the rest of us. You either work the farmland and earn a living off of it, you rent it, and you also make money off your hunting, which the solar is gonna mess up. I don't care what everybody says. Or you right now sell to solar because you don't have an option. And that's not fair. Look at how many houses you could put on that piece of property. If you did all the overlays and all the restrictions and all the stuff, look at how many houses they would have let them put on that farm versus how much solar he can do. It's not fair. That's just, I mean, you guys look at it. You can figure it out, but that's the problem. We're so limited on what we're allowed to do, and yet this is coming in as a public utility. It's not a public utility. It's an industrial use. You're correct. Kick it out of the ag conservation zone. Kick utility scale out of the ag conservation zone. Make them apply for rezoning. Try that avenue. Won't happen. I mean, and if you want to go through that, you know, we can start going down that road, but then you're going to set a precedent that we can take our land out of ag conservation and rezone it. That'll get interesting quick. So, I mean,
don't get me wrong. I'm in favor of this ordinance the way it's written. I'm not in favor of taking it out, but I'm, like Commissioner Buxton's already said, I'm going to lose that battle. He's waiting to see it so he can put it out on Facebook that Sweeney finally lost something.
well, I mean, look, I respect all of you for having to do your jobs. That drives me crazy that you don't see that how wrong it is for utility scale solar to be in this ag conservation district. And the only answer I have for that is I live there. My heart and soul is there. 5 generations of my family have been there. My family is going to remain there. This is not fair to those people that came before me, that I have a responsibility to do the right thing to. Do you not think, you know, I love the Smoky Mountains. I could certainly sell a farm and move to Tennessee and have a beautiful view. I have a responsibility to my family. I have a responsibility to my community. I have a responsibility to the next generation to do the right thing and preserve this land. Delaware doesn't have very many areas like this left. We need to do the responsible, correct thing. My family flew to Oklahoma to go hunting this year. 25 years ago, there wasn't anyone in my family flying to another state to go hunting. There's problems here. We need to do what we can to preserve what we have left. That's just the truth. So, I mean, I appreciate your time. If anybody has any questions, I'll answer it. I don't want to just tie up time. I'll work with you any way I can. I can tell you that I know you've had problems this time. If this thing gets any closer to some key people, you're going to have bigger problems than you've had this last time. So the right thing to do is to get this ordinance in place and try to work within the bounds of an ordinance. But, you know, I'm shocked that there's only one application in, because I have stacks of, you know, postcards and letters and offers and stuff that people have brought to me. And it's just, which I don't know if they're just feelers, like I've looked at them. Are they feelers? Are they just spreading them out to everybody? Is there actual intent to buy? I've heard of several that have been contacted that it seemed like actual intent. I don't really know, but we need to get ahead of this in Kent County. So, and I, you know, I'm hoping, and I appreciate Eric working on the ordinance. I wish we could have done it in October, I think, when it got drafted. This feels like a long time. Like it was September we started this fight. This is February. It's time to get this done. So,
Amen.
Anyway, anybody have anything? I'm good.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kevin Goldsboro. I reside at 668 Lighthouse Road, Smyrna, Delaware. I swear to tell the truth.
No swearing in tonight's committee. Thank you.
So, I doubt that adding any laws, I doubt that any laws are needed to be added to protect our conservation lands. On the surface, it would appear to be a good idea. However, I believe the reason why we are here is due to the fallout from last week. The same thing happens whenever there's a shooting. Everyone asks, how did this crazy shooter shoot up the place? There should be laws against this person from having a gun. The fact is, in most of these instances, there were already laws in place that were to prevent this shooter from having a gun. They simply were not enforced. The same thing is happening here, where laws exist but have not been followed. And I pray that these laws will stop Freepoint from placing this project across the street from my residence. Existing laws include prohibition of such a massive project out of the character of this area. The project also did not fit the criteria for a conditional use. Also, the 1968 law stating what utilities need to do in regards to when they come across burial sites is still a law and something that needs to be followed. If a 1968 law is considered too old, what does that say about civil rights laws also enacted in the 60s? If that were a set precedent and you told African Americans that those laws were just antiquated rules, they would have something to say about that. You can go back further and say that the United States Constitution is too antiquated, in which case I firmly disagree. I actually wish to act on the First Amendment and petition Kent County for a redress of grievances in regards to the lack of implementation and neglecting to enforce existing laws of what we experienced last week. Because of this, my family is passing around such a petition, and we will find thousands of people to sign it. Some politicians will say that the Constitution is above their pay grade. But when I enlisted and swore to uphold the Constitution in the Army as a private in 2009, I was only getting paid about $13,000. So unless you're getting paid less than this, it would be extremely difficult for me to accept such an answer. So I have a degree in criminal justice, and I have read many books on laws. But my favorite book is right here. On this book that we swear to tell the truth And we should also abide by the laws in this book. We are biblically challenged to be good stewards of our land. Many times in the Bible, Jesus challenges us in Matthew 25, verse 26. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. So by deciding not to do what is best with our God-given land, we are clearly not following God's law. This everything with to do with current laws and laws from a few decades ago to the Constitution and the Bible clearly exist. They exist and just need to be implemented. I hope that the governor means it when he says he wants farmland preserved. But yet his mandate pressures utilities with this 40% renewable energy standard by 2035. But this term, I want to draw attention to the term mandate. This disturbs me because in reality, it is no different than a king's edict. And let me tell you that only Jesus Christ is my king. However, does anyone recall the issues we had resulting from a king 246 years ago? His name was King George III. We cannot let illegal edicts comparable to his become what define us as a state or a country. This would not be the same country I went to war for 10 years ago. I am here tonight because of my love for this country and to make sure that we more thoroughly are looking into applying existing laws, because if they are not applied, we have a more lawless governing system, and we might as well still be under the control of a king. So, might I suggest, the only laws actually that need to be changed are the ones pressuring utilities companies to consume farmland for renewable energy at such an aggressive rate. Hopefully what I said was beneficial and gave you all something to think about. Are there any questions from me?
Thank you for taking the time to write that.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Thank you.
Are there any more public comments?
My name is Steve Robbins. I live at 539 Robbins Road, Frederick, 19946. I feel really inadequate coming up here after these people that have already spoken. You did a good job. I don't have a thimbleful as much information as that woman. I can't even touch it. And I have nothing but the highest regard for Mr. Cartanza over there. He's been here forever. We have a farm. It's just off Mid-State Road, and geographically, it's about the center of the state. And it's been in my family for 100 years, 110 years probably. My father was a farmer when we were kids. I was born in 1953. And my father farmed that property for about 30 years until he couldn't make it anymore. We only had like 130 acres tillable. We don't have Mr. Cartanza's thousands of acres, but we did the best we could. I can remember my parents sitting at the kitchen table with bills spread all over the place. My mother sitting there crying, saying, I don't know how we're going to make it. I don't know how we're going to pay these bills. I don't know how many years I sat there and watched that happen. So I'm just saying that because I've got some skin in the game too. I know how it is. I know how it works. I know how hard it is. And nobody could be any more in love with the farmland and the piece of property I have. Anyway, but having said that, I would like to put some panels on my property. Just maybe 25 acres. And I've got a piece of property that's surrounded on 3 sides by woods, and nobody would see it. You'd have to go out of your way to get back there to see what I'm doing. And it's not that I don't have a love for farmland or the respect that these people back here have for preserving it. It's just that I've changed my mind and I want to do something with it. And that's what I want to do. And my question is, your 1,000 acres, does that go from the top to the bottom between those 2 power lines? Is that the
Ms. Kiefer, you might want to articulate it. I can take a stab, but you're probably better.
Do you mean the 1,000-acre limit on community solar?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean the 1,000-acre limit on community solar?
Well, I'm kind of confused on the numbers here. I'm a little bit behind the curve here. I'm sure some of these people have been here several times and have done a lot more research on this than I have. That's why I say I'm a little bit embarrassed to be up here asking these questions, but I'm kind of confused on the numbers. The 1,000 acres, is that the total amount of acres that it's going to be allowed to have solar panels in that area?
In the sort of lime green area,
In the darkest green part?
I would say it's the darkest green.
Yeah, okay.
And outside of those purple lines. You see the purple lines that go from the top to the bottom of the county?
So what you're saying is between the power lines?
The power lines don't relate to the rule.
You're going to be fine.
Okay, well, all right. Well,
You're okay.
If you wanted to
All right,
hear that,
so-
you just heard it.
So my question is...
I know where you are and you're okay.
Mid-state is inside the groove zone.
Okay. My next question is, what's the, and maybe you said this, I apologize if I missed this part, but what's the limitation? Like, I just want to do 25 acres. I mean, that's...
You're
good.
fine.
You're good. You're good.
But
Even if we reduce it, you're still good.
But that comes out of that 1,000 acres, right?
No, not for your property.
So 1,000 acres is individually?
Cumulative.
It's
Cumulative.
cumulative, but it only impacts that dark green outside of the purple line.
You see the purple
Do you see the
line?
purple
Yeah.
lines?
So it's outside the purple line.
You're inside the purple line.
You're inside the purple line, so it doesn't impact you.
Okay, because I was kind of confused about, well, here's where my doubt came in, was my brother and I went to a lecture at the Kent County Public Library last week about solar panels. And we asked the question, or we kind of told the guy from DENREC the same thing that I'm addressing to you, and he said that he thought that there was going to be a limitation on the amount of farms that were going to be able to develop solar panels.
Not currently, not in the language.
Not in our language.
Okay.
If that's the suggestion, we're not inventing, we're trying to hijack some things and then apply some things suggested to us. So no, that's not suggested at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, I was misunderstood what he was saying, or maybe I was misinformed, but my concern was that, you know, if you didn't hurry up and do this, you weren't going to be able to do it at all. And that was my question. And like I said, out of due respect for these people back here, I understand about preserving the farmland, but, you know, I want to be able to do with mine what I want to do with mine. And that's more important. I understand that. I understand that. I'm just saying I sympathize with your I sympathize. I don't disagree with you at all, and I don't think the position you're in is a good, fair position. So I'm on your side as far as that goes, but.
I'm not being smart, I'm being dead honest with you, I agree with you 100%. You're inside that growth zone, you should be able to do whatever you want with your land, but we.
If Glenn Howe is still on, our kids have fat babies behind.
There's no way he's on.
And that's not fair. I don't think that's fair. But I just wanted to make sure my position was where I thought it was, and.
We're almost done. All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I just want to say that I appreciate you guys coming out and having these meetings in person. I think it's very important that we can talk face to face about this kind of stuff. So I appreciate you being here.
Every Tuesday night.
Thank you very much.
I grew up on 3 horse farms that my father sold every time. One of them was Bannister Hall. That used to be a big old house and farm. I lived in the trailer out there. Then there was one on Dover Kenton Road. Yep. Of course, my last stop was my horse track, quarter-mile track, and now it's Camden Commons.
Camden Commons.
Of course, my father was always the enemy of that. He was always the one making it happen. Any more public comments? Uh-oh. Didn't see behind there.
I guess you all know that I'm Donald Goldsboro from 1784 Woodland Beach Road by now.
Your son did a fine job.
Obviously, I wasn't, very happy with the decision that I heard on Tuesday. I believe some of the commissioners were wrong in their decision. I believe the law is not just for solar being a utility that they can have conditional use and be granted unconditional use. There's many other laws to be considered. And I thought they were brought up in front of you properly. I think the laws were whatever's done out our way has to be in continuity with the area and character with the area, antiquated or not, whatever you think. I still think you had to abide by that law. As far as the transmission lines, I believe they endanger my health. They certainly have been proven, I believe, from my research, to endanger especially the health of children with brain cancer and with leukemia. I think the laws are in place that you should not have voted to allow solar. Environmentally, I don't think they should have been allowed. I don't see how a commissioner can sit there and say that to develop that whole farm with solar panels has no effect on the flyway. I mean, I just think that's total nonsense. But that's maybe not within the law or whatever. But I don't plan on letting this rest. I think probably the commissioners just think that they voted to allow it, and that's going to be it. I think we had an opportunity that we could have worked together and done something, but I think there's some commissioners that just refuse to listen to the law, but I'm not going to let it slide at that. I'm not taking this as settled just because some commissioners, I think, and just did it because they wanted to. I think they went outside the law to do it. So I'm not planning on letting this rest. So, I don't know. Do you have any questions? You do you want to justify yourself in voting for it, or saying that you upheld the law? And
Mr. Goldsborough, if there was something I could say that made sense, I'd say it. There isn't. You have every right to sit up there and say what you're saying. I can't offer you anything. Because I don't want to try. I just recognize where we are.
And I think there's a lot of things where things weren't answered. You know, we don't know, but if there's a high possibility at Indian burial grounds, there's a high possibility that the old Hofecker plantation mansion has slaves buried on the place. There's an old landfill dump. It's probably leaching lead. A lot of houses were buried there that were torn down along 13. So if they come back and say that there's zero lead in the soil, I don't believe that. There's probably lead in there right now. And we had an opportunity probably to make them clean that up before he passed it, but things just seem to be hurried, and things were just allowed to be passed without, I don't think, doing right. I know some commissioners made a pretty valiant effort, I think, to bring it forward what was law, while other commissioners, I believe, ignored what was law to pass what they wanted. But if you think that you're just gonna pass it, and I'm just gonna say, oh well, that's that, I'm not. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other public comments? Any more public comments? Anybody on the telephone?
Tyler Anaya, you may unmute your line.
Again.
And I think you gave your name and address earlier. As you proceed.
Jeez, she hung in there a while.
Hey there. Yes, it's Tyler again.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to speak to a couple of certain things just to offer a different perspective. I know a lot of people have talked about just selling farmland inside or outside of the growth zone. One of the things that our family has been kind of riddled with is that we've had a few generations of farmland. It's been preserved to an extent, but through the years I've seen, struggles with the family that they've had to sell off portions of the farmland here and there to make ends meet when farming income wasn't as high as what that the family had hoped it would be. We actually have farmland inside of the growth zone and are fortunate enough to have been put in communication with a solar company who has offered to lease our property from us. So this gave us the ability to keep our farmland in the family. So again, very, very fortunate to give us this opportunity. So I think Mr. Sweeney, he kind of touched on something near and dear to my heart is I think everybody has a right to do with their land what they want to do. And that's something that overregulation scares me when we think about putting enforcement things in place where somebody doesn't have an opportunity to save their family's farm now because they're saying you're in this area where it should be in farmland preservation. I think I can say that I've met with quite a few families who have felt the same thing as I have, which is, man, it's really going to stink if we have to sell our farm just because of the fact that we aren't able to have family members who are farmers. We've had a lot of family members move out of the area. So, as far as renting the farm to local farmers so that way they can utilize the land, we've done that for years, ever since my grandparents passed back in 1999. And before that, even it was rented out. But we've also been hit with now those farmers are getting to the point where they're retiring. And So what do we do? And again, we were faced with that problem of how do we keep the farmland in our family if we can? And it became a sense of, oh no, we're going to have to sell it, I think, because at this point it's just going to go to waste and just kind of sit there. We don't know what to do because I'm not a farmer. I used to work for Kent County Planning, and now I'm a realtor. I'm not a farmer. But this is my backyard. I mean, this is something I get to look at every single day. And now I'm very, very happy that we have an avenue so we can, hopefully this goes through, that we can have a solar farm and the ability to keep this family farmland in our family for generations to come. Maybe generations down the road we'll have the opportunity to start farming again. The other thing I wanted to kind of touch on is that, you know, there's environmental implications of any man-made materials, I think. I think that just goes without saying. The one thing that solar brings to us, though, is that not only are we going to benefit from it in the low-income areas, it's going to help drive down our cost of electric for this area, but it's also going to help us reduce our fossil fuel usage. So now we're making less of an impact on the environment by being able to allow this for our community. So the last thing I think I wanted to just kind of touch on is, as somebody who used to sit in the planning office, and I've seen transitions and I've seen talk through the years of things, whereas we've talked about setbacks in regards to chicken farms. We've talked about setbacks in regards to telecommunication towers and the processing of such. There have been many applications that I've been a part of where the discussions have kind of gone through in my mind and said, wow, these seem very stringent. And now, I mean, from years ago when we started talking about telecommunication towers, and now to where we're at, there are certain changes that have transpired based on changes that have happened. So solar is not new, but it's I think the consensus is that it's going to become more prevalent in this area. And if that's the case, we're at the forefront to kind of join in where it's already happening in different areas. And I guess seeing extremely excessive conditions put into place, such as the gentleman was talking about earlier, is 4 rows of trees. Is that really necessary? It seems like to me, if you have a couple of rows of trees, it's going to buffer it, especially away from residential. You know, if somebody doesn't want to see it, okay, we have a condition of buffering it. As far as the soil testing, I think that's great. In my mind, I guess kind of cautious when it comes down to the enforceability of it on the planning office. Because I've sat in that chair and had to worry about transfer stations and enforcement measures there. So I guess I just wanted to point out that, you know, it would be nice to have conditions in place, of course, so that way we can have this as an administrative process, whether it's a utility or a community size scale project. But also the ability for a landowner to make a decision what's best on not only them, but also their family. So I see both sides, but I wanted to kind of put my feelings out there as far as not a lot of people have talked to, you know, what happens when you're forced into that situation because your generation's no longer farm. And that's where my family's at.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for sticking around.
Sure thing. Oh, and if I can add one more thing, I did. I was actually just told about this meeting last night, so I didn't really have a lot of time to look up a whole bunch of stuff. But one thing I did see, which I thought was interesting, is that there have been studies that have been done in different states where solar is obviously utilized more so than here, in regards to the benefits of solar being in a farm area, and for that being, you know, commingling with crops and things of that nature. So as far as everybody saying, no, this is going to be just absolutely terrible for the farm community, there are studies out there, and it looks like they have some pretty good data available in regards to benefits of it, not just, oh my gosh, I don't want it in my backyard.
Right. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for that insight.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking time to let me talk.
All right. Hey, thanks. Have a good night. One more?
You too.
All right.
Mr. Andrew, you can unmute your line and give your name and address for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Bill Andrew. I'm a resident of Sussex County now, in Rehoboth. I've lived in Kent County for the majority of my life. I ran Delaware Electric Cooperative for 23 years. I've heard an awful lot tonight with respect to solar, and there's a lot of technical issues that are misconstrued. At this point in time, I believe there are 4 governance and regulatory agencies being the legislation, the Public Service Commission, Delmarva Power and Light Company, as well as the Kent County Levy Court that all have rules that the solar has to abide by. Mainly, my main focus has been with Unity Solar, and my only offer would be to, if Levy Court would like to have a question and answer situation on the technical aspects of this, or have a meeting that they would like to, a workshop, I would be more than happy and available to help them. But there was a lot of technical issues that are going to limit the solar to sizes as far as the community solar is concerned. Thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody's patience.
Bill, I appreciate the offer. We'll take you up on that. Thank you for hanging in there. Does anybody have any questions for Bill? All right. Thank you, sir.
I see no more hands raised online.
Seeing no questions or public comments online, we've finished our audience participation. You want me to hit the gavel for you, young man?
Sure.
Go get it. Somebody.
Oh, wait a minute.
Somebody get a picture
One time,
of this.
Buxton, that's it. One time.
We're adjourned. I'm excited.
You've created
I'm good. I almost hit that again.
You've created a monster.
I did it once before up there.
Yeah.
It was a while ago, but I did it. Yeah. They tried to take it away from me. I think Alan showed up or something. Wasn't that what happened? Somebody showed up. I'm like, oh no, I'm doing this.
Sure would. Oh no, Mr. Goldsboro threatened us.
Easy, sir. I don't know what to say there. You know.
This is.
No, that's for your construction costs. Construction costs will go down